We're live.
Good afternoon. I would like to call the afternoon session of this special meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next meeting of the Board of Education is on Tuesday, August 25th, 2026. For the chairperson's report, I'd like to thank all of our teachers and staff for running our successful ESY and summer school programs for our students this summer. We are also excited to have the HHR building project wrapping up in a few weeks, and thank you to all of our staff in the town building committee for their hard work. Thank you also to our board members and cabinet for your time spent today for our full day board retreat. It's a long day and we appreciate everyone making the time to be here today. Since we will not be meeting again until late August, we hope everyone has a good remainder of the summer and we look forward to the beginning of the 26-27 school year. And we'll move now to public comment.
Good afternoon. If anyone would like to participate in public comment, please approach the podium and wait to be recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and town of residence and note that you'll have up to 3 minutes to comment. We have no public comment at this time.
Okay, now I'll move down to superintendent's report. Dr. Byrne.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the July 27th Board of Education meeting. As we reach the midpoint of the summer, the district remains exceptionally busy preparing for the upcoming 26-27 school year. In addition to our summer programming, leadership has been actively engaged in candidate interviews for open district positions, meetings with community members and state legislators. Alongside these key conversations, our staff and administrators are deeply involved in crucial professional learning, ensuring we enter the new school year fully aligned, supported, and ready to welcome our students. We're very excited about the progress of the HHR projects, and we're on schedule for completion in August prior to the start of the school year. On today's agenda, we have a full schedule focused on long-term planning and critical operational updates. Following our productive morning session on board governance, our afternoon will focus on key strategic topics, including a review of new Connecticut legal updates from attorney Jessica Richmond Smith, discussions of the draft athletics handbook, the draft 26 to 31 strategic plan, and a study on district transportation. We'll also discuss our board goals for the upcoming year, review fall enrollment figures to finalize elementary class sections, and map out the board meeting schedules and master agenda through early 2027. And I look forward to those discussions. Finally, despite a delayed start due to severe storms and power outages during the opening days, both Darien Summer School and ESY are currently running smoothly and will conclude on July 31st, 2026. Additionally, ESY will host a Bridge Week from August 3rd to August 6th. And that concludes my report for today.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to our legal update with attorney Jessica Richmond Smith.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all. I trust that everybody has received our comprehensive legal update, which is 30 some odd pages long. And I am pleased to tell you that I am not planning to read those 37 pages to you today, but I do want to say that what I'm going to share really represents what I think is most directly relevant to you as a board from the following perspective. Number one, what policies might you need or are you required to change based on these legislative changes? I haven't gone through everything exhaustively, but some of the key provisions that are going to require policy changes. As you all know, you subscribe to Shipman and Goodwin's model policy service. So as part of your subscription, we go through after we do our legislative update and we update the model policies that we have based on these legislative changes, and those will be turned out to you sometime in the fall. So that's number one. Number two, I'm going to be sharing updates with you that directly impact your work. And you know, of course, feel free to ask me questions about any other changes that you're curious about. So changes this year are extensive. They typically are. They seem to have been getting more extensive in recent years. And we've broken them out into different categories. I'm going to start out by talking about changes related to students. Then we'll talk about some changes related to curriculum, school security, employment that's specific to school employees, and finally, some changes related to finance and budget that you might want to be aware of. So regarding students, and this is going to potentially require you to think about a policy. As you probably all know, starting in July of 2024, districts have been the date change, the cutoff date for admission to kindergarten to September 1st. It used to be December 31st, so that shouldn't be news. But you were allowed to admit children early, provided that they met certain requirements that were prescribed by the administration. Starting this year, the early admission process becomes discretionary. You don't have to have one. I don't know if you all do have one. I looked to see if you have a policy on it, but I don't believe it's in a policy. The difference now is you can only admit students early if you have a policy. So if I'm correct and you don't have a policy, we should talk about adopting a policy if you want to continue to allow admitting students early. That ship probably has already sailed though, and you've probably already dealt with that. Starting next year, the early admission process is repealed entirely and you won't be permitted to admit students early who don't reach kindergarten age by September 1st. I don't know how many students that you suspend in your early learning program, but to the extent that there are any such suspensions, there's been a slight change, which is that under the prior law for students in grades preschool through 2, you were permitted to suspend students only if the student's conduct on school grounds caused physical harm. Those grounds have now been narrowed and students in those grades can only be suspended if they caused serious physical harm. So it's interesting. Sometimes we see a trend in these legislative changes, and this is part of a trend over the past, I don't know, decade or so to really narrow the circumstances in which students can be suspended, period, including suspended out of school. And the laws have changed too to try to narrow the circumstances in which, or to create disincentives to expel students. So this is part of that continued trend. This will require an update to your student discipline policy, which, as I said, we're going to be making a number of updates to the student discipline policies based on this change, as well as the one that's on this slide, which is that it used to be that students who are 16 to 18 who were expelled for the first time were required to have an alternative educational opportunity. So just to back up for a minute, you don't have a lot of expulsions here in Darien, but just so that you know, when you do expel students, you have to provide the expelled student with basically a full-time equivalent education elsewhere. And there are certain statutory standards around that unless the students waive those standards pursuant to an agreement with the district. So it used to be that if a student was expelled for the first time and they were ages 16 to 18, they were still required to be offered an alternative educational opportunity. Now students who are expelled for a first or second time have that opportunity. So again, we see this trend of the legislature trying to make sure, really, I think, create disincentives for districts to expel and to narrow those circumstances and to make sure that all students are getting educated elsewhere. There's a change related to immunization requirements. So this change says that in Connecticut, the state standard of care for immunizations will be based on schedules recommended by the Connecticut Commissioner of Health rather than the CDC. So regardless of what the CDC says, here in Connecticut, districts have to follow the guidance of the Connecticut Commissioner. The other thing that the law says is that Connecticut's Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which is a law that says that that public agencies can't burden a person's free exercise of religion. And if they do, they have to have a compelling governmental interest to do so. This law says that that act cannot be used as a basis to challenge school immunization requirements. So I wanted to highlight that one because school immunization requirements and the change that was made a couple of years ago related to those requirements and the removal of exceptions continues to come up in our legislature and continues to raise new issues. Stop me if I'm going too fast. Feel free to ask questions. Although some of these things we don't have, it's what's interesting about new legislation is that we lawyers have a lot of questions about the new legislation because this hopefully won't come as a surprise that some of these laws leave a lot of questions that have to be answered and are subject to interpretation. So this one I thought was interesting. See, Chris is here. Beginning in next school year, all high school athletes have to undergo an annual athletics health assessment before participating in interscholastic sports. And that assessment has to include a cardiac screening exam to see if there are any undetected conditions that could lead to sudden cardiac death in youth athletes. That's brand new. And I think that comes out of some concerns that have arisen in recent years related to sudden cardiac deaths among youth athletes because of undetected heart conditions. So the impact of that is that families will have to be made aware of this really well in advance because it starts to take effect next year. Probably should be added to your athletic handbook as well. Also on the subject of sports, and I don't believe this is an issue here in Darien, but the CIAC prescribes minimum academic requirements for students who participate in high school sports. This new law says that each individual district can't require students to meet higher academic standards than those required by the CIAC. Again, this is another one that will require you probably to revise or review and potentially revise your athletic handbook and other related policies. Opioid antagonist administration. So this is one also that's addressed in your administration of medication policies that will have to be updated. So this law says that prescription only, we call them legend opioid antagonists. It used to be that a trained school nurse was required, or a qualified school employee, and that's defined under the law, are the only ones who could administer the opioid antagonists, and that's still true. But it used to be that the qualified school employee could only administer it if the school nurse was not on site. That's no longer true. A qualified school employee can now administer a prescription opioid antagonist, which I understand to mean an injectable, as opposed to a non-legend or non-prescription, which is a nasal spray opioid antagonist, otherwise known as Narcan, usually. It used to be that only school nurses could administer them, even if qualified school employees were on premises. Now, either one of those groups can administer legend or prescription opioid antagonists. And the new law says that anybody can administer to anyone a non-legend or non-prescription opioid antagonist, which is, I understand to mean a nasal spray. The other thing that's important is that it used to be that parents or guardians could opt their students out of receiving these opioid antagonists, and the law repeals that. There are no longer opt-outs from administration of opioid antagonists in an emergency. So that covers what I believe to be the highlights related to changes related to students for you all to know. Curriculum changes. So starting with the class of 2027, so this school year, you now may affix a seal of civics education and engagement to a diploma of students who graduate and meet certain criteria. So what does this mean? It means that students have to have completed history or social science courses for at least 2 years, including at least one US government or civics course. They have to have engaged in at least one civic engagement project, like community service, student government, an internship with an elected official, or involvement in a civic organization. And they have to have demonstrated proficiency in civics through some sort of assessment, some sort of mastery-based assessment. And then they can have this seal of civics education and engagement affixed to their diploma and also their transcript. It should be noted on their transcript too.
Jessica, who comes up with the standardized assessment? Is that on us or the state has one?
It's on you. I believe it's on you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it could be essays, a project, presentations. It's just some sort of assessment that you come up with. Other changes recommended and required. Computer science, this probably won't come as a surprise to you, but beginning with this school year, computer science courses have to include AI and emerging technologies. And that computer science requirement already includes computer programming. Now it has to include AI and emerging technologies as part of the required courses of study. The State Board of Education is now required to make curriculum materials available in the area of Islamic and Arab studies. And they're required to encourage instruction in those areas of study. So you're not required to offer, but the state is required to make those materials available. So here we see a big push for boards to reduce assessment administration, and there are certain incentives that have been put into place to do that. So by next year, by next July, the Commissioner of Education has to establish an incentive program for districts that has the effect of reducing or limiting the time that students spend taking broad assessments, integrating state-provided interim and formative assessment tools into local curriculum, and increasing teacher competency in the formative assessment process. So the possible incentives that may be available are public recognition, financial awards, and this one is interesting, although we don't really know what it means at this point, enhanced autonomy or operational flexibility. So that's one that I thought you might be interested in keeping an eye on, but we don't really know what that means at this point.
Just one question, does the broad assessment limitations, does that mean that they no longer want us doing final exams for a semester, for example, in high school?
I don't really know. I mean, broad assessment is defined as an assessment that measures what students should have learned during a semester or school year. So possibly it excludes statewide mastery examinations, of course, and other assessments required by state or federal law. So yes, it does seem to point in the direction of local assessments.
Thank you.
I guess the thinking is, well, we're not going to reduce ours, but if you reduce yours, then the overall number of assessments will be reduced. So there you have it. School security and safety changes. So as you probably all know, in order to have school resource officers in your schools, you have to have a memorandum of understanding with the local police department. That requirement hasn't changed, but what is now required is that MOU be updated every 3 years. And it also has to include certain things. So the MOU has to include provisions addressing daily interactions between students and school personnel with SROs and a graduated response model for student discipline. So we often help districts develop these MOUs so that they're compliant with the law, but now you just have to keep track of the fact that it has to be updated every 3 years. And the requirements to the new MOU have to be implemented by the beginning of next school year. So you have a year to update your MOU. I believe you have ASSOs in district, and there's a change to ASSOs, armed security officers. So it used to be, so there's a number of changes. Number one, the law changed to replace retired police officer as somebody who's eligible to be an armed security officer in a school with retired officer. So that could mean it expands those eligible to become armed security officers to include retired parole officers who meet certain federal requirements. There are a number of changes that have to do with some of the other requirements that they have to meet. So they still have to have separated from their employment in good standing. And there's a new definition of what in good standing means. It means that they weren't terminated as a result of disciplinary action or during a period when the officer or parole officer was under investigation or disciplinary action was pending. They also cannot, retired police officers can't have been dismissed as a peace officer for malfeasance or other serious misconduct, calling into question the individual's fitness to serve as a peace officer, or they can't have resigned or retired during an investigation into such conduct. Okay. Employment. So this is a big one, probably the biggest from your perspective. I don't know if you've heard of this, but now when it comes to the termination of tenured teachers, you as a Board of Education no longer have any role in making that decision. And so what that means is it used to be that a teacher who was tenured, who was subject to termination, would have the right to request a hearing before the Board of Education, a subcommittee of the board, or an impartial arbitrator. If an impartial arbitrator were chosen, the findings and recommendations of the arbitrator would then be submitted to you, the board, for final disposition. So you could basically veto the arbitrator's decision, and I've seen that happen. Now it only goes to an arbitrator. The board has no role. However, the board and this has always been the case, an aggrieved teacher, a teacher aggrieved by an adverse decision by the board in a termination proceeding could appeal to the Superior Court. Now a board could be an aggrieved party and can appeal to the Superior Court if they disagree with the finding of an arbitrator. So there is some recourse, but that might not bring you much comfort in this context. The provisions regarding the termination or non-renewal of non-tenured teachers have not changed. So non-tenured teachers, unlike tenured teachers, are subject to non-renewal, which has a different lower standard than termination. And they have a right to a hearing in most, but not all circumstances for their non-renewal. They also have the right to a hearing if they're terminated. Non-renewal, by the way, has to happen prior to May 1st. Termination can happen at any time for one of the statutory reasons. And they have the right to a hearing before the board or a subcommittee or an arbitrator. So that hasn't changed.
I will say that in the initial draft of the law, the arbitration was for tenured and non-tenured teachers. And I know CAPS and CABE lobbied to get that, lobbied against both, but particularly that one, which thankfully did not go through.
There's some other little changes that I frankly don't think are terribly significant. There is now a new standard of causation for teacher terminations, which is the causation that's in your teacher's contract. It's just cause for the most part, but it really kind of always was just cause. Also, there's 6 statutory reasons why a teacher might be subject to termination. The 6th one has long been other due and sufficient cause, and that was just changed to other due and sufficient reasons. Again, I don't think the impact of that is going to be terribly significant, but just so you're aware.
Sorry, for the, it says that all termination hearings must be conducted by an impartial hearing officer selected by teacher and superintendent. So it's not the same hearing officer that we elect every
No,
beginning of the year.
no. I mean, it could be. It could be
Has
if
to be
the
mutually
teachers union
agreed.
agrees.
Yeah.
And if you can't agree, then it goes to AAA, the American Arbitration Association, to resolve that dispute. Yeah, good question. All right, so paraeducator healthcare subsidy, I thought you might be interested in from a budgeting perspective. So paraeducators have had some form of healthcare subsidy for a number of years, and it keeps expiring and getting renewed. So now there is a continued subsidy program for paras who open a HSA or Medicare eligible account and enroll in a high deductible health plan, which is an up to a percentage of the plan deductible minus the employer's contributions. There's also a subsidy program to boards that provide health benefits, even boards who are in the Connecticut State Partnership Plan, which I know you are not. and it's subject to certain requirements. I don't off the top of my head know the specifics of that program, what the subsidy is for the board. So if you're going to ask me that question, I can get back to you. But that's something to be aware of. I think you already finalized your para educator contract for the next little bit, but just going forward, this is something to be aware of, because if they're getting this subsidy, then arguably that might impact, what you finally settle with them on in the next contract. They might say, well, you're getting a subsidy too. But we have to figure out exactly what that is. So this one is very interesting. There is, I don't know how many people are aware of this, but there has long been a statute that protects employees who are absent from work or who are injured and absent from work because they were assaulted by a student. It has long been an open question as to what it means to be assaulted. And I'm not going to say too much about that in this forum, but what I will say is that assault has never been defined in the statute, and that's been the subject of a lot of debate and disagreement between boards of education and unions, because the question is, who benefits from this statute and under what circumstances? So for example, is it an assault if a 5-year-old student with an IEP hits a teacher or flails and a teacher is injured? I won't comment on that, but I will simply say that the teachers' unions have different opinions on that than boards of education and than your school administrators. So the law has not changed the definition of assault, and they haven't applied a definition or formulated a definition. But what they have done is they've repealed the other statute, which was a standalone statute that was unrelated to workers' compensation. They've integrated it into a workers' compensation provision and said that employees who have been assaulted are entitled to 100%, and who for compensable workman's comp compensable injuries are entitled to 100% of their pay. So for example, if they had gotten 80% from workers' comp, they would have had to have been topped up 20% by the board. Now workman's comp has to pay 100%. So it'll be very interesting to see what the workers' comp board says about how assault is defined and if they're going to take a position on this. It's always long been the case too that you can't charge their absences due to an assault to sick leave, personal leave, or vacation leave. So in some cases, there are employees who are out for a long time because of this, and they're not being charged for it in terms of their leave entitlement. What the other part of this statute says, which is interesting, is that even if it's not a compensable injury, the statute has a separate sentence that says they're still entitled to 100% of their salary. So that leaves open a number of questions, but that's just something to keep in mind, and I'll leave it there for now. But happy to answer more questions if and when that comes up. So this one, I don't know how many people, our board members, are aware that there is a professional code of responsibility for teachers. There's also one for administrators. The professional code of responsibility for teachers is codified in the Connecticut regulations, and it has a lot in there that talks about what's expected of teachers in terms of their, obligation to conduct themselves professionally. And it is often relied upon by your administration in dealing with disciplinary issues related to teachers, and similarly with administrators with respect to the professional code of responsibility for administrators. So we thought in 2024 that code was going to be repealed effective now. And we at Shipman were thinking, well, let's go ahead and codify it in a model policy so that it doesn't go away, because it has some really useful provisions in it. That repeal date has been delayed to July 1st of next year. So again, you're going to be seeing some movement from us in terms of our modifying our model code of ethics to include some of these, if not all of the provisions that are in the professional code of responsibility for teachers. All right, well, this is your law. which you're probably well aware of. And I wouldn't necessarily have brought this up with other boards because I don't know that it will directly impact you as a board, but I thought you might be interested to know that the law that came out of some work that you all did, along with Dr. Byrne, has been codified. And there are a number of slides about this law. I'm not going to read through them, in detail, although I'm happy to answer questions. But what I will say is that a loophole has been closed in the sense that it used to be that candidates for employment were required to disclose allegations of abuse, neglect, and sexual misconduct, if those allegations had been substantiated, or if they resigned while an investigation of those things was pending. Now, the exception for not having to disclose allegations that were unsubstantiated has been removed. So candidates for employment who were ever investigated for an allegation of abuse, neglect, or sexual misconduct, even if the investigation resulted in an unsubstantiation, still must disclose that at one time they were investigated for those things, as well as what the act adds is risk of injury to a minor or impairing the morals of a minor. So that was added. So they still must disclose that. There's some other parts of this act which candidly we're still sorting through, which are a little bit different. So for example, the State Department of boards of education now have to inform the State Department of Education if you are investigating an employee for any of those things. It used to be that you only had to report to the State Department of Education if the investigation resulted in discipline. Now, if you're investigating, you have to report to the state. And the state now in turn has to disclose information to employing boards of education if they're considering a candidate, if there was an investigation of those things, except if the investigation turned out to be false, if the allegations turned out to be false. Similarly, employers who are asked for information about candidates by employing boards of education have to disclose all these things unless the substantiation was reversed. So there's two different, I don't mean to get us into the weeds, but suffice it to say, we lawyers are still working through what all of this means. And we've asked the state if they intend to revise their forms related to these verification requests that boards have to send out to other boards, asking for information about candidates because the current forms are obsolete. So it'll be interesting to see what the state puts on their forms. And I think that will help inform our understanding of what boards of education are required to disclose and the information that we're required to solicit. Long story short, this is better. So good job. Okay. So the budget process, there is a fairly significant procedural change in terms of what you're required to provide to the Board of Finance during the budgeting process. So as you know, you have long been required to prepare an itemized estimate of the cost of the school budget and you've had to provide that to your Board of Finance at least 2 months before the meeting at which the appropriations would be made. So beginning with the with the 27-28 school year or FY 28, when you're preparing this estimate, Dr. Byrne now has to provide the Board of Education with the following things. For the 2 preceding fiscal years, the original amount that was in the budget and the actual amount. So how much was budgeted and how much was spent for the 2 preceding fiscal years. And then for the current fiscal year, how much was budgeted and how much has been spent to date for each line item. And then the board has to submit that information to the Board of Finance. And so there's more information essentially to, purportedly expand transparency in the budgeting process. So you have a little bit of time to prepare for that.
I would just add, Rich, would that add a significant shift from your department in terms of preparing all of this?
No, I mean, we already show the prior year actuals, we just don't show the prior year budget, so it will end up adding a couple columns to the report.
Thank you.
And finally, oh, two more things related to budget. Zero emission school buses. So this is in the sort of distant future, although it's going to come up quickly, given how much this will require from boards of education. So before you were required to have all of your school buses be zero emission or use alternative fuel by January 1st of 2035 and be fully zero emission by January 1st of 2040. So now the 2040 zero emission target goes from 100% to 90%. And so some of this doesn't really apply to you, but there's also some requirements on the next slide related to what you have to do before you purchase a zero emission bus. You have to develop and implement safety plans that consider students' ages and developmental needs and include procedures for evacuating buses in the event of a fire. So that's really the headline, is that there are some dates that have changed, and now the 2040 target is 90% zero emission, not 100%. Finally, regarding school construction program grants. So there are, under current law, the school construction grant program reimburses school districts for eligible school construction project costs, as you probably know, and the top reimbursement rate is 70% for new construction and 80% for renovation projects. There's additional reimbursement rate bonuses under the new law. So some examples include an additional 15% for an early childhood care and education program in an elementary school, or 10% for cooperative arrangements between school districts. There's also a new bonus of an additional 20% for any district where student enrollment has increased by 20% or more over the preceding 10 years. But you can't combine any available bonuses in a way that results in more than 95% reimbursement for a single project. So I don't know what your enrollment projections look like, but I thought that 20% increase might be something that could apply to you. And those are the highlights. I think I got that done in the time that you asked me to get it done in. As I said, there are 35 pages worth of updates in our education legislation update. So if you look at it and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board?
My questions are just what our practices are and some things already, like these are district questions, not necessarily Jessica questions. Just for our current kindergarten policy. I don't know if it's actually a policy or not, so I'm not sure, like this year.
It is a policy, and I think somehow in the rollover to board docs, it didn't make it on the website. So that I was looking for it, and I didn't see it, but it is, and we'll get it up there soon.
Okay, so then do we know how many kindergarten students this year have are younger than the cutoff in the upcoming year? And
I would say fewer than 15, that we can follow up on, there's not an exact number, but even the first year we had the largest enrollment, we had just over 20 students, I believe.
Okay,
And we've made fewer this year.
so then next year when they can't do it at all anymore, you don't expect to be parents upset.
I'm being more like a
I had a question just on the computer science course. I mean, since that is for the 26-27 school year that they're requiring AI and emerging technologies to be included, I would assume that our computer science courses already have that. Is that correct? Or did they have to change curriculum?
We don't have to change curriculum, but one of the things that we'll do is just ensure that there's appropriate integration of that technology across courses.
Okay, thank you. And then just one question on the health requirements with immunizations. I'm assuming that the pediatrician offices in the Connecticut State form, are they going to change the schedule of immunizations? Because that's the form typically that gets submitted to schools by parents when they have a physical. I'm just curious.
I think if the forms require changes, then there'll be change. Usually the pediatrician offices align with what's required
Right.
for schools.
Okay, thank you. Are there other board questions, John?
Just a question about the out-of-school suspensions for the pre-K to grade 2. So the threshold of remove, of a suspension is lower now, correct, right? The student has to remain given that serious physical harm.
Right, meaning it's less likely that a student will be subject to suspension in those grades.
And then at the same time for the workers' comp, right, in terms of there's no been changing or fine tuning of definitions within that, correct?
Correct.
So essentially.
In terms of what an assault is.
Right.
Yeah.
So essentially, we're potentially opening ourselves to more liability of a student potentially injuring a staff member and then without having a definition applied to.
I don't know that I'd
Workers'
say
comp.
more liability. I think that this is one of those strange things about the way the statutes work. But I think if what you're getting at, if a student is now, it's less likely that a student can be removed from school. And if they've injured a staff member, I think what would be important is to make sure that everybody's safe and that there's an appropriate safety plan in place, once that event has occurred. And by the way, the physical harm won't necessarily have been directed by a student toward a staff member. It could be a student toward another student that could subject them to discipline. But, as we always say, the safety plan component will be important.
Other board questions? Joanna?
The seal, the state's civic seal, is that something that you guys think you will offer, or is that something that the high school needs to discuss?
I have time on the calendar to discuss that with Mrs. Dunn, Kathy Oster, and Dennis Cabrera, but I would like to think it's something that we should offer. We have a number of students who, with their academic course load and their co-curricular activities, would benefit, and I think it's a really important thing to recognize on the student's diploma.
Just following up on that, I think to the extent that we can make it easier, similar to what we do with the seal of biliteracy, in terms of informing students that this is something that they can actually do it, because I think many of them already would have probably some of the requirements already done.
That's what I was referring to when I was saying including the co-curriculars. So it will be important to have Kathy Oster involved in that conversation so that the school counseling department can support students and families in discussing eligibility.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful opportunity.
Katie?
Amy, is that something that would come in front of the curriculum subcommittee as you guys develop that and kind of figure it out, or how might we receive an update?
I think that's a nice spot for it.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Greg?
You a couple times during the presentation mentioned like that there's still legal review of some of this stuff and interpretation. Like can you just elaborate on that and how that impacts us? Like, are we taking these laws as is? Is there like, what are we still trying to figure out, and how should we act accordingly to make sure that we're not doing things that are against the law?
No, it's a good question. So what I meant by that is that even with laws that have been on the books for years, lawyers sometimes have to interpret what they mean. Like I said, there's no definition of assault in that assault statute. So for years, we've been operating in this vacuum of information around that. You as a board, your obligation is going to be to review any model policy updates that we make, which will take into account all of these questions and areas of ambiguity to the extent that they exist. Review them and then consider them and adopt them if you agree, or, ask questions or make any changes that you think are appropriate and are consistent with the law. When our model policies are rolled out, they will take into account all of that, and they should be in turnkey form for you to adopt. What I really mean is some of these issues would arise more with the administration as the administration administers, their day-to-day work. So for example, there's going to be a lot of nitty-gritty around what is the administration what information are they supposed to provide in response to a request for information from another district about a candidate seeking employment in another district, and vice versa. What that sort of thing. There's not a lot that's unanswered, but there are a couple of questions where we think, okay, this law was written. And so we're gonna have to actually think about what this means and how it's put into practice. So by the way, will the State Department of Education. So a lot of work happens after the laws are passed with the State Department of Education, with CABE, with CAPS to really work on, okay, how are we gonna put this into practice?
Thank you. Other board questions? All right, seeing none, we will move on and thank you, Jessica, for your time. We'll move on now to discussion on the draft athletics handbook. Dr. Byrne and Mr. Manfredonia.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Jessica. That was very informative and helpful.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
And welcome, Chris. We appreciate you joining us today. So Chris and I haven't rehearsed this, but we're sort of going to talk with you about an overview of the changes. We did include the existing athletics handbook in the packet with the new draft. We're very proud of the work that we've done. This has not been easy. It has not been a short process. If you recall, back when Chris presented I think it was during the budget presentation in January, we talked about this idea of gathering information from the community and really bringing a level of clarity and simplicity to the handbook so that everything is understood by the community, that it brings a level of consistency and alignment across all of our programs that may or may not have existed, but there was certainly confusion about whether or not there was alignment. So we've been working since then with a group of district and school administrators, parents of student athletes, coaches. Chris has been getting feedback all along the way to really come up with what we believe is a really big first step in making some improvement around those key tenets of clarity, alignment, consistency, and simplicity. As you see in the memo, we really wanted to be clear about a unified vision, mission, and values for the programs. We wanted standardized operational protocols put in place, things like how we communicate with student athletes, how we communicate with our families, moving to communication only being through district-approved platforms. One of our new platforms we'll be using, Parent Square, has a module for such a thing, but no more use of WhatsApp or individual text messaging. Enhanced accountability and feedback, really standardizing the process of tryouts and the feedback that's given to kids. How we manage what happens when there's a conflict, that's consistent across all programs. And then basic tenets around health and mental health programming within that's clear to the families. Chris, if you want to.
Yeah, just to touch on that last point, Dr. Byrne, we also elicited the help of Alicia Dad, who was very helpful and insightful in this process and getting her feedback. She does work with our coaches, like I mentioned in January, but I think really utilizing her resource as a resource for our teams, moving forward will be helpful.
So we focused on establishing consistent standards so that every student athlete that participates, it's safe, supportive, a competitive environment where we really focus on developing our students and their capabilities. We still are working through some pieces of it. We're also in the final stages of a draft handbook for coaches. There is a lot of duplication, but we could just walk through, there's the table of contents is pretty clear about where we go. One of the pieces of information that was always a challenge that was shared with us broadly was finding information within the handbook. So, for example, what the policy is for working with a club program or an out-of-school program, what the rules are around that. And Greg always had a great comment on that. He said he would look, but the link was to about a couple hundred pages of a CIAC document. We've actually lifted the details that are relevant. We do still have a link to the CIAC documents, but we have the very clear statements around lifted from the CIAC document into our handbook now. And we think for parents, this will be very helpful. For coaches, it will be very helpful. And we're excited about the implementation.
Just one piece, we also had, I think, some clarity on recruitment and student athletes looking to go through that process and how the school is involved, how club teams are involved in that process. So there's an added section to that, which was not, I believe, in the previous document.
Are we going to go through any of it, or are you just the memo, and if we have questions?
I thought we
Okay.
could do the memo and questions.
Great.
We can also pull it up and go through it if that's helpful to the board.
Um,
And there's a lot of
There's a lot, no, I
information
realize.
in there.
Thank you very much. And I personally think that this is a great job, and I love the alignment of the vision and shared values sections in particular. I think hopefully this will be a really helpful resource and help standardize across sports and teams to make very clear expectations. So thank you very much for this work. I mean, what are the next steps from your standpoint in the
I
implementation?
think from our standpoint, it's finalizing, going through this again. We've gotten a lot of feedback from folks on the committee, just making sure we do a final good proofing of it, get it, make sure all the pages are set, everything is, all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. And then when we launch fall sports, we roll it out and we distribute it. We're hoping that the coaching handbook will be done in the next week or so that we could also, which basically everything that's in here is in the coach's handbook. So that we'd roll that up with the coaches as well for the start of the season.
Okay. Are there board questions? Joanna?
So the under guided and empowered leadership, it talks about training, coaches get training. I'm just wondering, what is that training specifically? And that all coaches volunteered and stipend, and not just, people that are stipend to be on the field, but stipend to do logistics or whatever? Like, is that everybody? How's it work?
So, sorry, could you?
Go ahead.
Okay, so all coaches are required to have a coaching permit, whether they're paid or volunteer. The State Department of Education does not differentiate between a paid or volunteer coaches. So a coach would go through the same training, whether they're paid or volunteer, which includes taking a coaching course, CIAC approved coaching course. If you're not a teacher, if you're a teacher, you're exempt from that. And then going through, once you have completed that course, every 5 years, taking coaching modules to retain your coaching permit. The district also requires, I think in this document, some mental health pieces that we're requiring coaches to have. We rolled it out last year to just our head coaches. We're going to implement that this year to all of our coaches. Again, not differentiating between paid and volunteer. And then the state also requires coaches to do, yearly checkoffs on heat optimization, and sudden cardiac arrest and head injuries as well. And then we've added the mental health piece as a district and looking to broaden it for next year to all coaches.
Other board questions? Katie?
Chris, are coaches also considered mandatory reporters?
They are, yep.
So that's part of the training.
They do
Yeah.
that training.
They do that
Yeah.
as well. Thank you.
Other board questions? Yes, Joanna?
What is a DHS certified trainer?
So we have 2 athletic trainers that we subcontract out for. There's a separate state licensure for athletic training in the state of Connecticut that both of those individuals would hold.
So the taping,
Right,
Yeah.
but I was just wondering because it said
no, it's
DHS.
just, because they were assigned to the high school.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're subcontracted out. They don't work, they're not our employees.
right, I didn't think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't create our own new certification for that.
Are there other board questions? We're talking about the handbook.
I quoted you, Greg, in the beginning about the 200-page link to find the CIAC roles, how we lifted the important pieces and put it directly in the handbook as opposed to having to read the 200 pages to find what you need.
My only question was, I read through it. Thanks for putting it together. And I know there was a lot of work and time spent in it. This is the first time the board has gotten to look at it. What is the next step in terms of the board providing input, feedback? How does that work?
Well, any feedback here, or if you have written feedback to share with us as soon as you can.
Okay.
That way we could take a look at that and make any additional, we shared that we anticipate there's still going to be modifications prior to the launch, but we're trying to prepare this for use with the fall season.
Okay.
Are there other board questions? So if the board member, Joanna, go ahead.
Yeah, keep going.
So the 5 universal pillars of recruiting. I'm wondering why that's in there. I think that the stuff you put in there, like which coach is responsible for the recruiting, you know, whether it's your club coach or except for football and that stuff, but that seems to be more like something that, I don't know, why is that in there, I guess, in such great detail?
I think that, it had never been in the document before. So I think, many of our student athletes do go on to play college sports, whether it's Division I, II, or III. So I think just kind of codifying and clarifying what that process would look like and what the school's kind of input and work behind the scenes is, a lot of this comes from the clubs for most sports, not all, but most sports, what their inputs are, so that parents have expectations about who should be doing what during that process.
And we think this gives a baseline information. We obviously anticipate that there'll be instances where parents need a meeting or a follow-up conversation to understand it, but we were silent on it completely. So this at least gives a baseline of how it's supposed to work.
Katie?
Yeah, I appreciate the inclusion of that. I'm sure that we'll have lots of elementary parents that are looking to it for information. I did, though, wonder about its placement. That stood out to me as well, because as I was reading through it, it comes before even like what coaches' expectations and all of that. So like in my mind, maybe this should be an appendix versus like one of the first things that we read.
That's great feedback. Take it back.
One other question I had, just looking at the existing handbook, which did list out all of the different sports by season. I don't know if that was in one of the links, because the links weren't working in the PDF of the new draft, but.
It is in the link.
Okay.
Yeah, it's linked. There is in the link, the
Okay.
season of the sports being offered.
And I had another, just kind of a minor question. In the captain's standards, I love the 5 core leadership standards that you've included there. One question I would have is, because the freshman and sophomore coaches for the teams that have those are nominated by coaches, not elected by their team. I would think that we would want to state that those 5 core leadership standards also apply to freshmen and sophomore captains as well as varsity. And personally, and I know one thing that stood out to me is that an expectation for captains' parents was to model sportsmanship, but I think we should also say that captains themselves, as part of one of those leadership standards, should also model sportsmanship, which wasn't, it's included elsewhere, I think.
Yes.
But in that leadership role, I think that's an important kind of a piece of it as well.
One of the links in this document is an FAQ for captains' parents. I think that was one of the adjustments that we made, was the modeling of leadership and sportsmanship for all parents, not just for captains' parents.
And for the captains though
And the captains
themselves. Yeah,
themselves, right,
yeah,
correct.
thank you. Are there other board questions or feedback? So if anyone does have additional feedback, I know we're trying to wrap this up in time for the fall, so.
Send it to me, Chris, Cass, the 3 of us, we can get it there. This is great feedback though to start.
Thank you very much. I know this was a lot of work, so thank you for everything that you guys have put together here. I think it's really helpful.
I just want to publicly thank Chris, because when I talked to him about this back in January, I think he got a little nervous that this was going to be a crazy process. And I actually think it was a really helpful process. And I know you put a lot of time and effort into this, and also to you, Cass, because you've been putting this whole thing together. And to those folks on the committee that have been helping us, their time has been greatly appreciated. Our coaches, our administrators, and the amount of reading that people have done and feedback going back and forth. Thank goodness for Google Docs in this instance. It was a really helpful tool for us, but thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much. And we'll make sure that we get any feedback to you soon so that you can finish this up, but I appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you.
So now we will move on to discussion on the 2026-2031 strategic plan. Dr. Byrne and Dr. Fettigan. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
So this has also been an incredible process, working through with lots of people. I can't even count how many people have been involved in the strategic planning process, but this began back in the fall when we gave the fall update to the board, but began talking about how to streamline, how to organize, how to design the new strategic plan going forward. So Dr. Fettigan is going to walk us through all of this, but I want to thank her for her taking the lead role in this. Thank my central office administrative colleagues, because each of them were part of this process this year in different sections, as Amy will walk you through in a moment. And all of the folks that came out to some of the feedback sessions and gave us feedback. So I'll probably jump in and out, but turn it over to Dr. Fettigan and we'll go from here.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Byrne. Good afternoon, everybody. Today marks a significant milestone for us to really think about what's gone really well with the district in the strategic plan for the last 5 years. Thanks, Cass. As we transition and think about really setting forward a very clear roadmap for our work ahead over the years 2026 to 2031. And today's retreat is really an opportunity to have an open dialogue to review just that, where we've been, what we've heard from the community, thinking about how we can best position ourselves for continued excellence moving ahead with our students and staff, family and community members. As Dr. Byrne mentioned, this district with strategic plan was really built locally with the input of a variety of stakeholders. And one of the things that we'd like to focus on today is we've intentionally moved from 7 high-level strategic plan goals to 4. And something that we shared in the board packet materials was not only the slide deck and the actual comprehensive strategic plan, but a memo to accompany the plan. And one of the things I'd like to draw your attention to in that memo is the fact that this strategic plan is really rooted in the district mission, vision, and vision of the graduate. When we think of that vision of the graduate, those are the competencies that we believe as a community and that research would tell us, and different community sectors across different sectors would tell us are the most important skills and attributes for our students to enter whatever awaits for them after their 12 plus years in the Darien Public Schools. Another thing that we focused on was what a district strategic plan is not and what it is. And so we just want to emphasize again that this strategic plan is really a key priority and driving force for the board governance. It provides direction, it provides continuity across board leadership and administrative leadership for a school system, and helps to connect district-wide goals to what's actually happening in classrooms through departments and schools. So this strategic plan is what Dr. Byrne and I will work on with the building administration and the different department leaders to ensure that their plans align to this overarching district strategic plan. We went from the 7 goals to 4, and they're more streamlined. And I'm just going to give you a high-level overview just to remind you, because we talked about this earlier in the spring. What we did was the old plan had the vision of the graduate as a separate and apart. It was goal number 3. And what we said is that shouldn't be a standalone goal. That really needs to be integrated through all important areas of our work as a district, teaching and learning and operational. The other piece was, as far as instructional technology, that's something that really needs to be integrated across the goals, and so does professional learning. So that's how we've kind of streamlined from the 7 to the 4. The revision timeline here just kind of brings us back to, we had talked with you all and earlier community members, as Dr. Byrne said, in February. And we did say today in July, where we are with the board retreat, that this would be initial discussion and possible action. But again, this is an open dialogue for you to have the opportunity to look at revisions to the plan and provide your input. What you will notice in the plan and what you saw in your packet is, along with the 4 goal areas on teaching and learning for student growth and well-being, we have a goal around recruitment and retention practices. We have a goal around community engagement and communication, and the final goal is around fiscal planning. Each goal area has focus areas that really speak to the high-level nature of the work in each of those goal areas. There are specific strategies that are laid out for each goal. And then what we did add was key performance indicators. We had in our old plan KPIs. We also added objectives, key results, OKRs. And what we decided to do with that was, there's so much of the work that we do in district that's very easily measured by quantifiable metrics. Then there are other parts of our work that aren't so easily measured by metrics, but are critically important. I think about the athletic handbook that was just introduced. Having an athletic handbook that's been written and authored by the important key stakeholders in the school district, and having that be something that helps operationalize athletic experience for students, staff, coaches, athletes, that's not so much a metric that's easily quantifiable and tangible.
Yeah.
However, it's a really important objectives result for a school district and administration to come to terms with. So that's an example of, and I actually gave you an example in the memo where, for example, we think about multi-tiered systems of support, which we'll talk a lot about as a board and administration in the upcoming year and years. Some quantifiable KPIs related to that might have to do with, for example, the number of students that we move across tiers. Who needs more support beyond tier 1? Who's getting service in tier 2 or tier 3? How do we exit students out of that? Those are very easy quantifiable metrics. But having a really systemic, coherent MTSS framework that is efficient in how it operates, that's coherent across schools, across the 7 schools in the school system, there are some more things there that are more objectives, results oriented, and we want to be able to communicate to you within the strategic plan about our progress with those things too. So we hope that that is a feature that the board will appreciate. And then the last thing before I go into some of these slides to talk about trends and areas for improvement, one of the things that the community asked about was a glossary. The last strategic plan, we had a glossary, but it was kind of a running list of acronyms. What we've done now is we've taken the glossary, we've not just included the acronym and literally what it means. We've provided some context so that board members and community members can know what that thing is and what does it mean for us in Darien Public Schools. And what we've done is try to organize those according to kind of a big area, whether it's curriculum and instruction or something related to how the district operationalizes the work, or something that's related to, for example, the CSDE and legal frameworks that we use in the school district. So we hope that that organization will help all of our stakeholders. So there were some emerging themes with the strategic plan, and Dr. Byrne, jump in anytime here. We met with PTO leaders, CDSP, we met with administrators, parent groups, and students across the 7 schools and other community members alike. And some of the emergent themes that arose were around its comprehensive design. People really appreciated that there's a holistic structure. It captures all aspects of a student's experience. Some of the feedback that we got was, hey, let's make sure we're not focusing just on the literacy piece. Of course, we know we're focusing on mathematics, and we're focusing on how the other department areas support literacy and numeracy across a child's school day and across their school years. A significant and kind of repeated comment was about institutional trust, really being very clear, black and white on paper, what the plan is, and providing an opportunity for feedback at the board table and for community feedback along the way. There were several people that commented to me and Dr. Byrne, like, we can't believe you're looking for our input in this. Like, this is really cool. So we got a lot of great feedback along the way, elementary, middle, and high. People appreciated, oh, go ahead.
The systemic approach, that was something we heard a lot about, that pre-K to 12 is everywhere throughout the plan with all of the areas. And that's something that was very much appreciated.
Yeah. It's so thinking about, for example, the work with MTSS framework or even literacy, right? We're not just thinking about K-3 literacy. Everything that we're doing in district is really trying to think about that coherent student family and staff experience. There was commentary around the vision of the graduate integration and the interdepartmental synergy, especially across general education and special education student support services. That was noted. People talked about it being a clean logic model, and that really that there's kind of a very clear description of what the uniform expectations will be across the district.
Yeah, consistency and alignment across all 7 schools.
Speaking of alignment, academic alignment, what was resonating with folks, academic alignment specifically around literacy, MTSS, vision of the graduate, and that curricular continuity. People were talking about having access to the curriculum, especially through EduPlanet, which will be a much more public launch this year. We'll have all of those stage 1 documents there. Families especially seem to appreciate that. The communication and transparency, people are very enthusiastic about Dr. Burns' regular weekly emails, and also the opportunities for the fireside chats and book clubs. And we actually had some people making additional recommendations for book clubs. So I think those will probably continue this year. The staff support and system consistency, thinking about having embedded professional learning across the school year is something that not only our staff talked about and administrators, but families as well.
Parents, there was a lot of positive parent feedback around that, the staff support and the professional learning.
Especially around protecting the school day, making sure that we're not interrupting the instructional school day. So as you know, we've made a shift away from those 6 early release days, and that we will be providing embedded, integrated professional learning with instructional coaches at the elementary level. And then again, through professional learning communities, preschool through grade 12. So those were some key areas that people seem to know and appreciate. Of course, there are always areas for clarification and improvement. One of the most repeated was, can you please get rid of the educational jargon?
We got rid of a lot
You got to remove it. So what we tried to do is that, and what you'll notice is when you look at each of the goal areas, and then there's a focus area. So for example, when teaching and learning, right? A significant focus area for teaching and learning is the work we do in the area of literacy, the work we're doing in the area of the MTSS framework. What we tried to do is really come up with like a tagline and then key strategies that would appear underneath. So for example, with aligning curriculum instruction, assessment, and resources, the first big tagline is we're going to review, refine, and communicate the curriculum with transparency. And then there are very clear action steps that follow that you would see there, including the last one, maintaining curricular documents that are up to date on the website, easy access, making sure that all staff are looking at the right documents, we're all on the same page, and that our families have access to those as well. All right, other areas for improvements. Some folks did mention, I think especially at the elementary level, improvements to the quality and nutrition of school lunches. So thinking about how we can ensure that that part of a child's school day is something that we're thinking about. And in thinking about the transportation with bus routing and drop-offs. And I know we have a lot of technology even with Pick My Kid, and we've got the kids, we know exactly where they are throughout their route. So I know that's something that Rich's department has worked on and will continue to. Again, thinking about broadening the academic focus. We talk a lot about literacy in the school system, as we should. It is the most fundamental thing that we do with our young people, teaching them how to be very strong readers, writers, and thinkers. And we need to make sure that we're also focusing on those other subject areas and thinking about how they're all supported and integrated. And then another area that was identified for clarification and continued improvement was thinking about, with recruitment and retention, how we formally onboard staff into the school system, how we make sure that we have mentorship, not only for new to district staff, but when teachers change grade levels. That's something that we want to make sure that we're really orienting them to the curriculum and thinking about what other supports they might need. And that we have consistent exit interviews, and that we're thinking about how we're tracking retention. So those were some of the big picture ideas. So we did have the plan to a very short 2 pages front and back at one point, but it's not quality or quantity. It's really the substance of what the plan, what's in the plan that I think is most important. And it's a little bit longer, but it's much shorter than the last one. Dr. Byrne and I think it's much more direct and easy to follow. And I think most importantly, it speaks actually to the work that we're doing. It's a very concrete plan to drive our work moving forward. Within this plan and across the 4 new revised goal areas, we've identified these top priorities. specifically focusing on instructional rigor and personalization. And that will be executed through that really strong MTSS framework, making sure that all children have goals to support their learning, whether they're at grade level, below, or ready for a push beyond. Another significant priority area is making sure that we're strengthening transitions, especially 5th to 6th and 8th to 9. So we'll be working with not only the administration and teachers, department chairs, but also the school counseling department to think about what we can do. Interestingly enough, not only for the staff and students, but I think particularly for families. I think that's probably an area that we have not addressed as strongly as we could, and we'll look forward to in the duration of this next plan. Classroom calibration and consistency. One of the things that we're really excited about beyond the curriculum and the scope of that kind of stage 1, those unit overviews, is ensuring that we have common syllabi in each of the department areas, especially 612, that will be critically important. So when teachers are teaching the same course, the syllabi will be common and it will be accessible for parents on EduPlanet alongside the curriculum with the key resources and text that are used in those courses. So that will be there for the beginning of the school year. Most of it is already up and running.
And consistent grading practices
And
as
consistent
well.
grading practices, right? That's all part of it. Professional learning ecosystem. So again, a top priority is to think about protecting the instructional school day and making sure that we're investing wisely in the types of professional learning, embedded professional learning with coaching and mentorship, and thinking about how we use MTSS and also professional learning communities, PLCs, that we already have time for, including grade level meetings, to really provide strong professional learning that is during the school day for staff and protecting the instructional minutes. And then finally, operational excellence and accessibility, making sure that the resources that we have through the Board of Education's budget are really appropriately supporting the work and the drive toward continued excellence for students, staff, and families across all 7 of the schools. There are some notable tensions and concerns, right? Every time you think about a strategic plan, if it were just a clear path A to B, it would, be easy for everybody, but that's not always the case. There's always kind of a push and pull in the work that we do in schools, and these things won't surprise you. The push and pull of technology, like tech and tactile, really wanting to make sure that we are doing our best to protect children from screen time, thinking about not only the time that children are on technology, but the quality of that time. For what purpose are they on there? So that's a very deep commitment for the administration now, especially thinking about K-8 and some shifts that Dr. Byrne has communicated to the board and community that we'll be making there. Really making sure that we're providing that balance, but also we're thinking about the legislation we just heard about. Technology is a thing, and we need to make sure that our kids are best poised and positioned to be successful as they move through their school years here and beyond. And then again, just the measurement and the intervention, thinking that, there's this idea of wanting to make sure that we're really keeping an eye on every child and what their growth and mastery is along the way. We don't want to rush to special education services. We also want to make sure that we provide supports, the just right supports in just the right time. So general education, working very closely with special education to ensuring that there is a very smooth continuum between what happens in tier 1 when children are receiving interventions or if they are referred for special education services. And then again, I think the only other thing that I would say that used to maybe be a tension or a concern, thinking about metrics and the type of metrics we use to measure our success as we move along in this next 5-year plan. I do think it's important to note, again, the inclusion of key performance indicators and objectives, key results, because I think both of those things are critically important to measure the success of a school, of a Board of Education, and a school district administration and staff. So those are kind of the big picture highlights. And then our next steps is, of course, to continue to have feedback on the plan as it's drafted, so that what we'd like to do is once it's finally approved by the board, as I mentioned, Dr. Byrne and I will be using this plan to really drive the school and department improvement plans so that there's alignment between the district through to the schools and departments, horizontally across the levels, across the 5 elementary schools, and vertically preschool through grade 12.
And we do see this, we'd like to see this as a living document, that as we come and bring it to the board for annual reporting, that we get feedback from the board if we need to course correct or make any shifts at that point, we certainly have that conversation, but as we're doing the work, if we identify something that maybe there's a KPI that isn't as effective as it could be, we want this to be a living document so that we can make the modification to be the most effective KPI.
Thank you very much. Before we get board questions, I just had 2 points of feedback. I think this is a really great document, and thank you for consolidating the goals and integrating technology, especially in the vision of the graduate, kind of throughout. A couple points that I had or questions. The top priorities slide that's noted in the memo as well. Those really resonated with me, but when I looked at the strategic plan itself, it was hard to, I think some of these key kind of top 5 priorities almost get lost in the focus areas, the key focus areas. And what would be really interesting or helpful would be to say, how or where, maybe we have a bullet point that's the instructional rigor and personalization, and then those focus areas fall underneath that. And I don't know if that's easy to do or if that makes it more difficult, but I think these are such important priorities. And when I was looking through the strategic plan, sometimes it wasn't as easy to kind of focus in on which of these strategies and focus areas related to these. And maybe it was more in the goal number 1 that is more important. The operational ones, I think, are pretty straightforward, but that was just one point of feedback, because I think it would be, maybe it's just with the way that it's organized, that we can kind of easily, see how and where these are kind of relating to each other. But that was just one point of feedback. And then the other question I had was in terms of the metrics and ongoing reporting. Is it our intent that this would be a snapshot each year when this gets reported on in terms of the KPIs and OKRs, or would that data be housed somewhere so that we can see trends over time?
So we see it in a few ways. One, there are metrics within this plan that will be housed in systems that we're putting in place. But we do see an annual report where we present to the board and give updates.
Great. Thank you. Are there board questions? Joanna?
Well, just to circle back to what you're saying about the living document. So you do envision if something comes up and the board discusses it and it's sort of like mutually agreed upon that something needs to change, just making that change.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just generally, my other question was under strategies, are these things like check marks that you're going to be checking off? Or are these some of the things that you've been thinking through and are examples, but not necessarily exactly what you're going to do?
So I would say, I would not look at this as a checklist. I think the work is much more complicated and dynamic than that, but I think that this provides, again, like a compass and a roadmap, and also there should be evidence of this and look fors in all of our work. So, as far as provide professional learning, the principles of UDL, check, like we could offer that, but that's going to happen. It's going to have to be ongoing. We have new staff coming in. We have different curriculum revision cycles. So I don't think it's as clean as a just check, we've done it. I think it's about like how we monitor and adjust.
And more like what you're envisioning these things look like.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Katie?
Thank you. So I really appreciate your comments, Eric, about this being a living document. I think that has been something that at least I personally as a board member have felt a little stagnated before when we have a strategic plan for a number of years and maybe it's not growing and evolving with us. So I very much appreciate that mindset. I did want to ask where, because this is a multi-year type thing, where do new pilots and initiatives fall? I really like what's in here. I like the way that we're thinking about it. Amy, I think your memo really goes into like what we want to see for the long term. But where do we go from, just status quo, growth and progress versus innovation and bringing something new to the district?
I think there's a couple of different places, and And I think it's also part of the living document piece. But if you look at the very first strategy in goal area 1, the review, refine, and communicate DPS curriculum with transparency, the alignment of curriculum, instruction, assessment, and resources, that's an ongoing piece. And that's our curriculum review cycle that needs to be in place. And that's the place where this isn't something we've identified everything that we're doing now, that as we go through those processes that are in place, those systemic processes, that we're identifying where are the opportunities for innovation, where are the opportunities for improvement, and then we build that into our annual plan.
So then like coming back to the piece of feedback that you mentioned, Amy, about, you know, broadening the academic focus by explicitly naming some of those like areas. This is something that you see potentially getting a little more granular on an annual basis as we're completing these process. So we might say, you know, this past year, we've really kind of found and noticed this, and we're thinking to test out.
Absolutely, that would be part of the annual process.
And I think, you know, I agree with Eric. It exists in a few places, and I'm thinking about the last part of goal area 1. The idea of cultivate inquiry-based learning, student ownership, and future readiness. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity and potential there for innovation.
Great, thank you.
Other board questions? John?
I'm just looking at the draft of the strategic plan of the core values. Kind of given what a hot topic and how politicized DEI has become, can you just explain your rationale for maintaining that in the core values?
These are the existing core values of the school district. We did not get any feedback to change any of those through any of the groups as we went across through the year. But we are also focused on what are the things we're actually doing from this plan, and there was not any negative feedback around that.
Do you think you personally should stay in there?
Do I think personally? I think the core values that exist, if we want to go through a process and revisit the core values as a school district, we certainly can do that. I think that the key focus areas and the strategies are very reflective of the conversations that we've been having at the board table with all of you, and we've been having with the community, and aren't grounded in any ideological arguments or anything. It's really based on teaching and learning as you go through the full strategic plan. But if the board wishes for us to revisit the core values, we certainly can do that.
Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I had the same reaction. I was kind of looking at core values and vision of the graduate and wonder, I mean, I wasn't here when those things were put in place, and I think most of the board members were not here. So I think revisiting some of that stuff and making sure that it aligns with what the board's objectives are. I don't think we need to make like huge changes, but like even one question I had was, do we really need both of those? Why do we have both of those? Are they duplicative? Like, what was the reason? I don't know what the rationale was at the inception of this whole thing. And I agree with John, like there are definitely some hot button words in here that created polarization in the community and even at the board table, which I think we want to avoid going forward. And I think that the board today is probably a lot more aligned in terms of what we collectively want to accomplish than maybe what it had been in the past. So I agree with that sentiment, for sure.
Other, Dave?
Yeah, I just want to echo what John and Greg have said here, because we have a list of 6 things, a list of 7 things, a list of 4 things. I think the 4 and even the 5 top priorities, the way those are labeled out, like that seems to really be the focus. So maybe we need less listing of objectives and really just focus on the core, which I think the top priorities does a very nice job of.
Other board feedback or comments? Okay, thank you. Oh, Katie?
Sorry, I just wanted to note that this is indicative of a lot of work. And I just want to both commend the 2 of you and all the multitude of partners that you guys worked with. It's really, really important for us to be thoughtful and long-term and thinking broadly. And I feel that you guys have done that. And again, I just want to highlight the living document and the plan to be nimble and flexible with this is really important. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And everyone at the table, Shirley, Marge, Rich, and all the people that came out and took the time to meet with us. We had parents that had never been to any kind of meeting to discuss stuff like that. And we got to meet a whole new crop of folks that we hadn't. We had full faculties in some buildings. I met with about 30 high school students. I had a great time with them, getting their feedback, and they had a lot to say and a lot of good information that they gave us. So thank you. We really, to me, it was a great process in getting to know more folks and really speak broadly about the work that we're doing. And
Thank you so much.
Oh, Greg.
Sorry, I just had one more. I know we sort of talked about this earlier, but I just want to bring it in the context of the strategic plan. Like, I didn't really see it. I echo Katie's sentiment as well, just in terms of just the amount of work. I mean, there's so much text in here. It takes a lot to get through, but we talked about systems, processes, procedures. Like, is that as explicit?
That is built into
Or is
here.
it just like the fabric behind all this stuff and like, reinstating Darien standards? What are those for everybody? Like, is that part of what's behind this?
Right, that is
or-
part of what's behind this. So there, the operational pieces, the curriculum review cycles, all of those things, all of that is here. And as we said this morning, that it would outlive all of us at this table to the people who replace us and are in our seats, so that there are systems in place so that as people change, the system continues to move forward. So yes, 100%, that is all behind this work.
Great, thank you.
What, just on that note, would that be an OKR, for example, in goal 1, if we have the systems and the infrastructure behind this?
Well,
From
some
a
of it
platform
is,
standpoint, and I don't know how granular you want to get on that, but I agree with Greg's point, because it's the systems and infrastructure that outlives the people potentially, and what you've done and what you're building is pretty significant, and I think a big improvement from a data standpoint and than what we've had in the past. So that's something that's worth mentioning, I think.
that's a good thought to think about. How is that reflected in our OKRs? And that's
Yeah.
something we'll take.
And maybe one tiny example of that is like for goal area 1, an OKR is around like observation of instruction. Now, the KPI, right, is the percent of courses and grade levels with documented and published standards. But having an actual curriculum that's complete and comprehensive and available to the public, to me, that's an objectives key result.
In EduPlanet, right, or whatever, the
Yeah.
data.
Whatever platform.
The
because-
platform that you were
Yeah.
using it's a significant effort, and a lot of work has been put into that, which is going to help us be more efficient and be able to track all of these things. So thank you all, because I know this is a huge amount of work, and I think it's also exciting that you have built it in a way that not only is it a living document, but it will be granular and able to be used by the staff and the departments in a way that will be useful to the teachers to help us on a day-to-day basis and, to kind of readjust and work through the curriculum so that it meets our needs and goals. So thank you. And we'll look forward to seeing this rolled out over the course of this next number of months.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on now to
So
discussion.
do we
sorry.
want to, I know
Take
you
a
talked
break?
about taking some breaks because we're ahead of schedule. And I think the transportation study,
Yeah.
there may have been some folks looking to tune in when we got to this point. I'm not suggesting that we wait until approximately 3:15, but if we want to take a few minutes break
Sure.
and then come back to the table, I think that would be my recommendation at
Okay.
this point, just a
So how long do you want to take?
10-minute.
10-minute
Come back
break.
at 2
Okay, great.
o'clock.
All right, thank you. Like move an agenda item? Yeah. Well, it's board goals, but we could do master agenda, something that's, yeah. Or even consent agenda. Yeah.
There's, I brought refreshments in if anybody needs a drink or.
Yes. Like that did leave. Right. Okay.
Nice to meet you, Sheila. I just wanted to send the two.
Someone's just not.
Oh, you know, one was not, yeah, I guess. It's freezing. I'm not so sure to sleep. No, because it's 68. This is first sleep. We're not. Come on. I was trying to do, and you're so favorite. Very good sitting here. How I would. They all have their workers, so I'll be, they're feeling with. It's not readable. Here, we'll start here.
Nope, thank you.
Start here.
Oh,
That's so nice, Sheila. I
Thank
hope you
you.
guys ate too.
I know, I already had some here, Kate, handy for everybody.
I can't have that.
Greg, here, I'll leave these to you. You guys can pass them. You can pass them around. I already had some.
You guys, these minutes are wild.
Why?
Wasn't absent late, early departure.
Why did Sarah drop out?
She Jordan didn't drop it, yeah. But
Jeez. The amount of crap emails I have.
oh my God, right? Jesus, we actually have a million things on today.
I just went out to the ones and frozen, like, a little popsicle.
Yes, thank you so much. This is like so awesome. I have a question. So if it's just.
Do I have to do that public comment language? Because she lives here. She's really just observing me. I know because Jessica was here, I had to, right? But I don't know. I was feeling everybody's like,
But I don't. Just because.
Right, because then I'm just saying,
And then people see it.
You're right, right.
You know?
Oh, you mean like saying, should we still?
Yeah,
Just for the record.
Yes, actually, yes, because then
I
you'll.
always feel like everybody looks at my.
No, no one does. No one does.
No.
I think like she'll look at you and, you know,
Yes.
and then you can quickly, 'cause
Yes.
like that used to happen to Joanna before she was on the board.
Right,
She
I
was in
remember.
line here, Right, and she's constantly, good, right?
Yeah, but no, I think that's good too, because people,
Because people can see you.
True,
right, and people actually like, even like people watching,
We have
they
four
want to
viewers.
be. Well, one is coming from Hawaii.
Oh.
Okay.
She's on vacation. I was like, wait.
Yeah, I think it's,
Yeah, okay, very good.
but I will all expect to just move right through it. So is parent space up and running? Parent space is up and running.
Parent Square is up and
That's what I meant, parent square. Did we communicate out about that?
There's really nothing to communicate about it.
Well, I've gotten some complaints from parents that like stuff is happening
Oh,
about
yeah.
sports and they
Yeah,
don't
they
even
may-
know what it is, and so just FYI.
We will maybe.
I was like,
I didn't know Chris and Ellen were gonna do some rest.
yeah, I heard about that and I was like, if it makes you feel better, I was like, I don't have it yet either, so. Parent Square is
Oh.
apparently already up and running and some people are now, but they're like, what is this? Why are things happening? And I didn't know about it. There's a platform.
Oh, I just thought it was an email she sent out and we could, wasn't even, it was for ninth graders, right? The email
Yeah,
she
she made a
sent.
mistake. So
Okay.
she sent, the Aspen hadn't updated, so what was supposed to go to 10th graders went to 9th graders.
Oh, so
something like
the
that.
ninth graders went to tenth
But,
graders, 'cause
yeah,
that's probably why I got
It
it.
doesn't look very, it shouldn't look very different.
No, it didn't.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, but I saw it was from Parent Square in there somewhere. I was like, ah, that's so nice.
I didn't really notice where.
But yeah, Aspen says it's not
Yeah.
down till the ninth. I would assume they're like doing all the things they have to do on it. And it's just not.
Okay, so you got some time. You're at the midpoint, right?
Take a change, we.
You're excited. Awesome. We're excited for you.
Wanted us to have Aspen. Version of
Our school.
Yeah, here's the ours team.
So that their parents would leave them alone about grades.
That's interesting.
Parents would not be texting above it.
I think that's.
That tells you a
brilliant.
lot. Yeah, like, there's a lot of
I
information
mean,
in that
that's the
request.
thing, I guess.
And it was not, I mean, there was resistance, but once we did it,
I remember reading somewhere that like,
I'm sure the parents who bought cell phones and all technology got it were ones that are setting.
of course, 100%. I do remember reading somewhere that like once, I don't remember where it was. Like once access to grades, when parents had access to grades, it used to be like just in your book, then the kids maybe got it, but not like change the whole kind of parents-teacher relationships.
Yeah.
I still get a heart attack every time.
Oh, I get so many emails from Aspen, because my threshold for below is the same.
I knew, you said it was a handful.
I thought it was a handful. I was gonna go.
For me, it was
Because I know it's just a lot, and then I look
only
through
if it was
it.
below.
No, and then I look through and that way, when like sometimes 5 emails will come in with like 100%, right? And so then I send my kids a text, like,
Great job.
I was like, oh, looks like you're crushing it in algebra. But what I also do is, because I will forget,
Yeah.
write the text and transport it. So then the next time.
Yeah,
I
Robert,
pull it up,
how
it's
about
written.
we,
Uh,
good idea.
Switch
It's
around. It's so funny.
the
That's what I do.
master agenda.
What do you think? Consent agenda's at the very end.
Yeah,
right
I would
now.
leave consent agenda where it
Okay.
is, but I think we could.
Enrollment?
We could move enrollment.
Maybe do enrollment. Is that?
So I thought something, remember the right name.
Master agenda.
Yeah.
I don't remember it
Okay.
either.
Okay.
Oh, this is confusing.
Yeah, do enrollment and then master.
Okay, okay, all right, what's happening?
What's happening?
Yeah. I didn't even look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking.
Yeah.
So in high achieving districts, sometimes if they had an idea that their kid would be going, the laws change, I was just curious.
It's so funny, just it's taken the state like 3 years to catch up because this is how the legislation should have come originally. It's a bumpy road to get there.
That seems how it is.
Figure it out in a couple of years after they've received feedback from everybody. But maybe they should have asked for it first. Yeah, I love your glasses.
Thank you.
Sharp.
That's very kind of you to say, considering that this was a $15 3-pack Amazon special.
No way.
They're just like 0.5 readers.
They're sharp.
Unfortunately, that's where I'm at now.
Happens fast, right?
It's like overnight.
There, and then like, it's only 0.5. Like,
Mhm.
I
But it
have to,
matters.
like, you can't even
But it's
guess them
amazing.
at most places, but it matters, right?
I mean, I waited so long, I had this credit 5 already at one point.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're
I
gonna,
know.
we're gonna do enrollment
Okay, do you want?
and then master agenda. Do enrollment and master.
They're general
because
learning.
it's not gonna take very long.
Oh, you don't think? Okay. Whatever. All right. No, I have to go.
No.
Although when I went to the eye doctor last, she's like, well, I think your glasses have progressive prescription a little weak. So you don't need as bad readers. And the next time I'm gonna be like, no, just,
I tried the, and I was,
Mine are progressives.
oh, yeah.
Progressives, but my sunglasses too.
Oh, you should pass
I
those
don't have
around.
them. I can see nothing. That's why when I get into a store, I have them on, I stop because it's then too dark in the store. I take them off. Before I bump into something or something.
You're not gonna serve the whole room, Greg?
Anybody else want?
thank you. Wait, did they do this?
I had them already. Joanna, do you want some dessert? Can pass
Is it red
to them.
velvet?
Yeah.
Pass it to the
I never
workers.
turn down a cupcake. Has to tell
You
me.
guys should take them
Red
to your
velvet
side
is
of the
the best.
table over
It
there.
is. I agree.
Hand them around.
It's because of frosting.
I don't know.
Yes.
Like, as a little kid.
They are good.
I had them
already.
Velvet because it's
Yeah.
not a real country.
We had popcorn in French, which was really good.
It's always such a discipline.
Popcorn, they had like
That's
bowls
what
of
they're putting in.
popcorn, remember? It's like snack.
I used to love it.
I know, I can't believe you're going to Greece and Italy. I'm so jealous. Oh, they-
Still a little bit.
I wish my family lived before COVID.
Yes, they're just, well, it's almost a month after I got to school. He's gonna be like a latchkey kid, for a little guy. We're thrilled about it, but I'll feel terrible. Oh, is Amy driving? She has a permit. It's camp, but yeah,
She's must have sent any girls.
she absolutely is from camp. She's killing it.
Really?
Oh my God.
How?
Girl, she's fierce. She's a force.
But she doesn't have her phone, right?
She plays. She's got her brother. She's got little minions.
She uses smokes.
She kills me.
Yeah.
Because he's a typo. Think of a phone schedule. Areas or labels, you know,
What is that? Here. It's like a. Maybe somebody can ask us this.
Oh, this is
We started.
one little thing. I mean, some material. I don't know where it is.
He said he's coming back in a bit, so we don't need to leave him.
Like a bit, like,
I don't know.
you don't know.
We can get started.
Should we just start? I don't know if Dave,
Yeah. We can get started.
did he seem to indicate that? Okay.
Yeah, again, just say that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a frog.
And what's something else on the table?
It's Shirley.
It's
Definitely Shirley. Shirley's microphone is possessed.
She's a burner microphone. It does sound good, it's like right here.
We had a frog under our deck and it didn't sound like a frog. It sounded just like that, like, brrr.
What do we do about?
And then after 2 weeks, it finally came out. And it was
We're gonna
like,
do enrollment and then master agenda.
yeah,
Yeah, so hopefully we'll. Maybe we can get it.
I can't, just the thought of feeling that on a bare foot. Well, I was afraid my dogs were gonna pick it up and then,
Ooh.
I found a frog in an average house in the basement, but we knew we needed a basement system for the water with a frog living. I don't
We-
think it had ever seen the outside world. Their world was so dark.
we used to get them in the pool and Avery was always the one that would catch them, like with her bare hands.
Oh.
I don't think
Not the boys, but it was always Avery.
I don't think she'd want to do that now.
I don't know. Maybe she gets it. Only a year ago? And it was when we had more TVs too.
Oh,
That seems like so long ago.
yeah. Well, that was a good introduction for you.
It led to changes though.
Yeah.
Silver linings.
Yeah.
So we should meet with you.
Yeah.
Oh, is it ready?
David, are you ready? Caitlin, will you poke your head? Is David in there? Will you let him know we're gonna go back from the break? Okay. Yes, you're good to go.
Okay. We are now continuing with our agenda and we are going to revise. Do I need a motion to make a change to the agenda order? May I have a motion to change the order of the agenda to now discuss items F and G, which are discussion on enrollment for the 26-27 school year and possible action on setting elementary class sections, followed by item G, further discussion and possible action on board master agenda for August 2026 and February 27. May I have a motion? Greg, seconded by John, all in favor? That is unanimous. So we will now move to item F, discussion on enrollment for the 2026-27 school year and possible action on setting elementary class sections. Rich.
So we are requesting that we set 108 total elementary classroom sections based on the current enrollment and the board's class size guidelines. There are 108 sections budgeted against 110. The two that came in under were Henley Kindergarten and Holmes third grade. Overall, there are 4,404 students enrolled, which is 34 less than last year and 37 less than the projection. The drop is the small cohort going through the high school. We did see some increases in kindergarten and Tokenique. We talked about that age 5 cutoff. If you remember last year, Tokenique was actually suppressed a little bit. And now that those kids are eligible for kindergarten, we saw a little bit of a rise. There are 3 sections we wanted to highlight that are close to tipping. Holmes third grade and 5th grade are 1 student away. And then Oxbridge kindergarten is 2 students away. And those are really the highlights.
Okay, are there board questions on enrollment on the projections? Joanna.
So the Holmes third grade, if we've already budgeted for 4, and we're only 1 away, does it make sense to take it out and then put it back in if we go up again? I mean, 1 is not something that's beyond the, you know.
It's certainly, if the board direction is to make that move, we certainly can. I think it's always important for us as before we get to the point where we adopt sections, we need to look in both directions, up and down, because if we're never looking at where enrollment drops, but it is, as Rich said, that's one of those numbers that's really close to tipping.
So the number has stayed consistent for like the last 10 days. In the past, before we kind of get closer to the school year where everybody knows their teachers, the board would give the superintendent flexibility. Could we see that extra 1 student, let's say, come into one of those grades, that the superintendent can just notify the board that he's adding that, say that 3rd grade at home.
I think we did that last year as well.
Correct, yeah. And then that would just be emailed to the board as a notice saying that we ended up adding it. Because you do obviously have a couple of weeks before you really have to worry about the school year. So.
I mean, how does it affect hiring for these sections? If we drop it and then the student shows up and, or,
Well, we're already hiring based on that section, not breaking.
okay, so you're already planning on just the 3.
Right, we're planning on what Rich is telling us right now. So if we break open an extra section, we'll have to make it.
And sorry, and how does delaying that decision impact our ability to retain?
Well, go ahead, Martin.
It hasn't normally been a problem, especially with elementary. I mean, this year is more challenging than most, but you know, we get it done. Sometimes we offer a 1-year contract.
We're still seeing candidates for some of the other open positions, so we get new applicants daily with our posting. So I don't think it would preclude us from finding someone if we needed to at a certain.
And Rich, what was the other that was close to tipping?
So Holmes third grade and Holmes 5th grade are both 1 student away, and then Oxbridge kindergarten is 2.
Okay. And for the 5th grade Holmes case, you're not as concerned about that either.
No, you don't tend to get a lot of students
For
that move
5th.
in and register late in the upper grades.
Yeah.
Okay. And just one question that I had was related to the middle school and high school. So 9th grade down 21 versus, or sorry, down 19 versus projection. And Middlesex down 12, but I think a lot of that was 7th grade. Do we have any idea about reasons for those?
So typically in the secondary levels, your persistence ratios, which is the retaining of the students year to year, is always lower than what you'd get in the elementary schools. And that's a combination of students going to parochial schools, private schools, moving out of town. And so you always tend to see that in those grades. You know, the one big drop was ninth grade, which is really a movement of the eighth graders deciding not to go to Darien High School.
How did that compare to last year? Because I think last year was pretty
So
large.
last year, so the last 5 years, we've seen the persistence ratios typically in like that 98 percentile. So it has been relatively consistent the last 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Are there other board questions? Greg?
One follow-up to that is, how many of those students that leave come back a year later in the same grade?
We would have to look into that. We do typically see the kids coming back in 12th grade. And so they might leave in 8th grade going into 9th, and then they return into 12th grade. But we can check how many come into that same year.
Okay, and then my other question, this might be a dumb question, but when we look at the elementary schools in particular, and sort of like, I'm thinking more like utilization of this space, like Royal was just expanded. But I don't know if the population is changing. Like, when we think about this, do we also think about like the districting of the students, not just like what's still there, especially given all the work that's been done in some of the schools?
I mean, so there's capacity issues, certainly at Oxbridge is probably the one elementary school that has the most capacity issues. And that primarily was when enrollment projections were done during construction. It was pre-COVID. And then if you go to post-COVID, you saw a lot of people come from out of state into Connecticut. And so that's one building that certainly has capacity issues. We did see last year, Royal saw a large jump in enrollment. And so Royal is the lowest enrolled school of the 5, though it's not that much lower enrolled anymore than Holmes, which is the next lowest enrolled. But the one school that probably has capacity issues is Oxford.
But so is there excess capacity at some of those schools that have just gotten additions and things like Royal?
I wouldn't say that there's excess capacity, but where you have like empty classrooms, but the rooms themselves could add more students based on the guideline.
Are there other board questions? Katie?
I wanted to ask about the 11 student variance in 7th grade and how that might relate to a trend. 'Cause to me, that makes me think that maybe some people are trying or then saying MMS might not be right for their student after a year in 6th grade. Do we have any, am I off base here? Is there any
So I don't know if we
additional
have any
data?
data that says like the school's not right for me or it's not a good fit, other than the family made a choice maybe to go to another school, whether it's to move out or I said like a private school or appropriate school, but we don't get any data that says
But is
not a
that,
good fit, or you might be able to infer that, but
Right.
nothing definitive.
is that typical though from years
You do
past?
tend to
And-
see, yeah, you do tend to see in the middle school age, and not just in our district, but other districts.
Everywhere I've worked, yeah.
The middle school tends to be the school where you start to see the transferring out to parochial.
And is that number within like
It's
the
within a
range
few
year over year?
students of what we've always seen.
Okay.
Just one follow-up to that on 7th grade, just given that the actual enrollment for 7th grade is larger than the 2 other grades, do we think that might be related to the size of that grade in the classes? Or
No,
is
I
this
mean,
different?
it's been that same bubble going through from. the
Okay.
past.
Thank you. Other questions?
I just want to come back to the elementary for 1 second. I just, so what I heard you say in response to Joanna's question, Eric, was that if the section were to tip with that extra student, that we would be able to open another section in time. And I just wanted to confirm that that's what the board should expect, or that should the sections tip based on our current guidance, we will create. Great.
Okay, any other questions from the board? All right, then,
So Rich, how should that be stated in the approval?
So the board would set 108 elementary sections with the flexibility of the superintendent to add additional sections based on ongoing.
On the enrollment, yeah.
do I need to add that to the motion? That language?
I think let's see. Yeah, I would just add,
You're right, here, let me know what I heard. With flexibility.
for the superintendent to add additional sections based on enrollment.
All right. May I have a motion to approve 108 elementary class sections based on the current enrollment for the 2026-27 school year with flexibility for the superintendent to add additional sections based on enrollment? May I have a motion? Joanna, seconded by Bill. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. And now we will move on to item G, further discussion and possible action on board master agenda for August 2026 through February 2027.
So there are, the second reading of this, you'll notice several updates in red on the digital version. On December 8th is the technology update that was added. And January 7th, which is Thursday, we had moved that proposed budget presentation from Tuesday the 5th to Thursday the 7th. I would also like to suggest that we add one other piece, which is on the consent agenda for August 25th, is as the approval of the strategic plan.
Are there other board questions or comments on the master agenda?
I'm sorry, Eric, could you just repeat that one more time?
I'd like to suggest adding to the consent agenda for August 25th, the approval of the 5-year strategic plan. And then the other changes that are reflected was the December 8th technology update. And that the meeting that was originally on January 5th was moved to Thursday, January 7th.
So just the one that's not
Yeah,
highlighted here.
not highlighted,
Great.
that will be added in the minutes.
Thank you.
The approved version.
Okay, and then if any additional agenda items come up that need to be discussed in the interim, then after this is approved, then we can add that at that point in time.
Yep.
Okay. Are there other questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none. May I have a motion to approve the board master agenda for August 2026 through February 2027 as amended with the addition to the consent agenda on August 25th of the approval of the 5-year strategic plan? Joanna, seconded by, may I have a second? Bill, all in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. We will now move on to, what do you want to do now?
Let's go to transportation.
Okay, we'll move on to item D, the discussion on transportation study and school start times. I'll give it to Rich to give us an overview, and then we are joined by Mr. Dave Solicito from
Yes.
School Bus Logistics. Thank you.
So the board contracted with School Bus Logistics last school year to evaluate the possibility of a later school start time. School Bus Logistics looked at a number of scenarios on how that could work and what the impact would be. With busing, you know, when you change one input, a lot of outputs also changed. And so the report that School Bus Logistics came up with outlined some of those changes. And then we have Dave here who'll give us a highlight, and we're here to answer any questions.
Great, great. Can you guys hear me? Is this on?
Yeah.
Great, fantastic. Thank you all for having me today. Look forward to walking you through some of the things that our team has put together. Like Rich just said, you know, we were asked to analyze some scenarios. The gentleman who actually did it is not here today, so I'm here to fill in from our company. So any specific questions, all I'd ask is that we can get back to you with those kinds of answers and we can go through this, okay? Let's see. I'm going to skip through. There's a slideshow if you guys can see it up there too. About School Bus Logistics, you know, we were founded in 2010. Our president and CEO worked for different software companies and contractors. We have about 20 employees currently that are industry experts around the country, and we manage, you know, large and small school districts, transportation operations. We manage a lot of the routing. So like to work through with schools, different options, different ways of thought above and beyond what their current transportation operation has to deal with. Core values, safety, trust, and accountability. Obviously, those are the tenets when it comes to school districts and what they do. As we go through, we have our team here. Rob's our CEO. He's done some work for Darien in the past, and I know we've had a longstanding relationship with them. He's in Denver. That's where our corporate headquarters is in Colorado. And then myself, I live in New York. My wife's been an elementary school teacher for 20 years. So it gives me a little bit of a flavor of kind of what goes on when changes are made when it comes to transportation. And Lance Osler is actually the consultant who did the work for this whole thing. If you guys have seen the actual report that was provided, it goes through in detail all of the scenarios. I'm sure a lot of that information will be helpful as we go through. As for today's presentation, I just kind of wanted to touch on the highlights and talk about some of the findings and then possibly answer some questions. The objective, as Rich said, basically, we were given a few different start times to look at to try to look through the bell times, look through the 3 tiers, evaluate it to accommodate a later high school start, and what are the effects of that going to be, all while looking at the district operating 25 buses on a 3-tier system. I'm going to skip ahead one here so I can go through this and I'll go back to that slide. But really what we see here is your current scenario, right? You've got your high school, your bell schedule, your earliest pickup time, your latest drop-off time. And all too often what we find when we look at these things is people look at capacity when they are analyzing the different types of scenarios. Most of the time it comes down to a timing issue and trying to fit all of these buses in certain times to get to certain schools. So one of the things we'll notice here is as we go through, the first scenario looks like moving the high school and the middle school to about the same time was the least impact. It still allows for kids to be picked up around the 7 a.m. period. And the latest drop off at elementary would be 4:21. As we know here in the Northeast, it gets a little dark by that time. As we start to go into scenario 2, that was really moving the high school back even further than it is, getting to that 8:15 a.m. start time. And really, that's where you start to notice some of the timing differences. We start to see things like, okay, high school pickup, the earliest time is 7:14 a.m. But if you notice at the bottom, the elementary school time, that would move that back to the earliest pickup being at 6:27. So that's, again, we're looking at 6:27 a.m. and the students on the elementary school side getting home at 2:47 p.m., which may be early, right? As we know, elementary school is usually the heaviest tier, meaning high school kids have sports and other things that they're doing. So we want to be cognizant of how that works out. The same thing goes with scenario 3, right? 8:30 a.m. start time, actually moved that back to 6:36 a.m. and 2:46 coming home. So there are some differences. And like I said, if you want to look at the actual report, these are all broken down in detail for each scenario and what they go through and how it looks. Scenario 4, 8:30 and 7:40. We'll see that the times bounce around a little bit. Again, whenever I see elementary school kids getting home 4:20, things like that, it gets a little scary, but it is what it is. So as we go through, that's the timing side of things, right? That's obviously, like I said, the easiest one would be scenario 2, but that's going to have elementary school kids getting picked up at 6:20 in the morning. That means they're getting up at 5:30, 5, whatever it is. Trying to get out there. As I go back to the earlier slide too, you'll see the other effect of doing these, right? So the current state, high school start time is 7:40, great. Scenario 1 at 8 a.m., we're not adding any buses. There's no additional charge. It's the least disruptive, it's some minimal schedule changes. When we get into scenario 2 and 3, we start to see the addition of buses and, the estimated cost based on the contract and that. But the idea is the operational conflicts, potential for late buses. That's where you start to run into issues. If anybody's flown lately, if the first leg gets delayed, you start missing buses and then you're looping back around and you're getting other things. Scenario 3, same way, reduced transition time, right? So when you start getting into bell times in between the schools, you start talking about the afternoon and the problems tend to compound as we go through, right? So if that first tier is late, they're late getting to the next school, they're late getting to the last school, which will only make that drop off time even later than what we anticipate based on the data. So again, unintended consequences sometimes to making changes. but they're there. So lastly, scenario 5 was really looking at making them all the same time so that the elementary school wouldn't have to do different things. And as you see, it would add 19 buses to do that. Again, it comes down to service and efficiency, and efficiency is the enemy of service, and service can sometimes be the enemy of efficiency. So that's where we run into those issues. As we go through, right, we talk about the key operational and student impacts. So elementary students moving tiers impacts childcare and creates liability risks if students are dropped off without adult supervision. It's a pretty obvious one, but it's one that sometimes can be overlooked. Schedule change may require parents to adjust work schedules for early drops off and pickups. And again, it's one thing to have a plan, and that's what we try to do is help you out with the planning and, you know, analyze every kid and when they get dropped off, but that's still just a plan. So as things start to devolve based on those late times or whatever, they can really push people one way or the other from the standpoint of, you know, being able to trust the information they're getting. Obviously, as we look through, you know, like I said, the reliability, the scenarios that compress the routing window time between tiers significantly increases the likelihood. So as you start running into traffic issues and unforeseen circumstances, that can only compound how the late and early pickup times. Obviously, lastly, athletics and extracurriculars, not that it's lastly, but, you know, it's one of those things that too, sometimes we'll have to give depending on what the school's trying to accomplish. You know, and that's something that you all can weigh out as far as how you want to do it. We also took a look at your walk boundary and looking at increasing service for kids and reducing the walk zones. And what you see here is you'll see the current walk zones, you know, we can do it with 25 buses. And as we start looking at increasing those walk zones, if we pushed it out to 1.5 miles, it means the addition of 3 buses. And when you start to get out to the half mile, it really increases the number of buses that the school will need. So truthfully, the way you guys have it right now, seems to be the most effective. Obviously, you know, as you make changes, we'll need to look at those things. As for the summary, you know, scenario 1, again, remains the most cost effective and least operationally disruptive. Obviously, it doesn't accommodate for that later high school start time, but, you know, there are things we can look through. Scenarios involving aggressive tier switching are reducing walk boundaries present significant financial and operational challenges, specifically regarding fleet costs and student safety and supervision. Again, as we look at that, if we're going to increase the walk zone and move the bell times around, you've got kids walking in the dark, you've got smaller kids walking in the dark, potentially both ways. So that's something to keep in mind. And, you know, really from a recommendation standpoint, we like to present the facts to folks, advise them, consult with people, but really it's a decision that the district has to make as far as weighing the pros and cons to each, and we can go through those, you know, in detail. Okay.
Thank you very much for this comprehensive analysis. I'm going to open it up to the board for questions. Joanna?
Before we get to talking about the tiers, the walk boundary analysis.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't change any of the belt schedules, but we want to reduce the radius for say the high school, how many more buses does that add?
That would depend, right? And we can go through and look at that. I can get you that answer in detail.
Okay, because that's just another option that I thought we were talking about, not just adding together, but also separately as things.
I'm sure we have that information. I just don't have it with me.
I would like to just add an additional comment. So at the bottom of the memo that we included, I just wanted to raise, because there are a few things that were mentioned that are considerations for us as we're considering any possible changes. The parent guardian availability to greet kindergarten students. We have an existing policy that requires an adult be waiting or an adult be waiting to greet the kindergartner at the bus stop. That's something we have to think about if we make modifications in either direction. The darkness and light at bus stops at times of dismissal and pickup. And a new one that with related to this was the recent passing of a bill in Congress, not sure where it will go, eliminating daylight savings time. I imagine these guys in the transportation world are already thinking about what the impacts are. I don't know what they would be at the moment in time. The impact on our athletics programs, because we do know that we currently, with the current start and end times of school, we do have a fair number of athletics teams that end up being dismissed early because of away games and competitions. And that would certainly be something we'd have to consider and get back to you on. Community field usage, if the day goes longer, that is less time available or later start times available for community usage of our facilities and spaces. There certainly could be impact on staffing. I did, when we put this study out, I did ask for some assistance from the Teachers Association on if they could gather just purely with those scenarios, if there would be impact at the different levels on staffing. And they have shared back that and this was not a scientific study, this was an informal study, but they did get a high volume of recipients, that there would be significant consideration by teachers to reconsider whether or not they could stay employed here if there were changes, particularly with scenarios 3, 4, and 5 at the high school level. Nearly 40% for all 3 of those would have to consider whether or not they could remain here because of their children and family schedules and the commuting. And those numbers were less significant for scenario 1, but scenario 1, it was 17% of the high school faculty, 11% of the middle school faculty, and 9% of the elementary school faculty, and they go up from there. And it, certainly we would want a more complete picture of that if we did end up having that further conversation. The impacts, we would need to consider the impacts on after-school programming. Our parent organizations that have enrichment programs in the schools, what is the impact on that? You didn't mention this, but I think it was in there, the window of opportunity piece, which is the timing of the bus runs and what the impact would be on that. We don't think about this very often, but the availability of actual school buses, you probably know better than I, but my understanding is there's a long lead time, and I'm not sure what that is for purchasing of school buses. This keeps coming up, our bus depot concept that we've been working with the town. We thought it was a dead horse, but our first selectman has continued rousting people throughout the neighboring communities to try and find space for that. But having a space, we had a conversation with someone about a space in Stamford a few weeks ago. It's just not big enough for our current capacity of buses. So there is a premium on space, as we saw Greenwich spent a year trying to find a location for their fleet, which I believe is about 90 buses. And the cost associated with that was frightening. When I read that in the news, I think they're paying just under $1 million a year to lease the space, and that's in the original agreement. So the location of a bus depot, and then in addition to the availability of school buses is the availability of additional drivers. And there is a national shortage of school drivers. So I'm not suggesting that any one of these or any of them would have an impact on those, but these are all factors that we have sitting in the back of our minds as we have this conversation and we think about any next steps moving forward. We need to look at all of those pieces as well.
For the walk radius, if it were to drop to 1.5 miles, we would need 3 more buses. And to drop to 1 mile, we would need 7 buses.
And that's just at the high school, right?
Can you repeat that, Rich?
So to go from 2 miles to 1.5 miles, we would need 3 more buses. And then to go from 2 miles to 1 mile, we would need 7 buses.
Thank you.
Are there other board questions? Katie?
Thank you. I appreciate this. Thank you for this, for being here to show it to us. And thank you, Dr. Byrne, for ordering this. We have been talking about this for a number of years without really having concrete information in front of us. So I think that's a big step forward for the board to be able to look critically at concrete data. A couple of things that I noticed, though. One is I really appreciate this list of factors that impact a change. I think it's really important for us to look at this holistically so that we're not surprised by any unintended consequences. I do find that the benefits are missing from this. These are really a list of negative considerations without any counter to the benefits that our students might receive. I would also argue that some of these considerations are thoughts of potential impacts versus us having actual data from community. So for example, whether or not we might have younger students unattended with an earlier drop-off time is a hypothesis versus data that we have. So I would love to see us take this as a very critical and important step and then move to the next step, which would be, I would think, having focus groups with parents to find out, how would this impact you? What would you like to see the district move towards? And that I would strongly think needs to go, all the way from PK to 12. And the staff, while I really appreciate, Eric, your foresight into kind of gaining that sense of what people might think, also without concrete evidence and board discussion, we don't really know what that would look like. So I'd love to see us do a more formal survey and have actual data from the staff. I recognize that this has been a bit of an ongoing and hot topic conversation. So I obviously want to say that doing the completion of the work would certainly not ensure that the board were making a change, but I do think that it would go a long way to helping us make a better, more informed decision.
Are there other board comments? Yes, Greg?
The added cost that you laid out, what does that represent? Is that like the for initial cost? Is it
The
annual
annual cost of a bus. So right now, the buses are basically leased from First Student. So each bus that the district contracts with is about 154,000. So you would need, 154,000 times the 6 buses if it was scenario 2, and so on.
And so this it doesn't contemplate the bus depot
No.
that you keep alluding to.
Katie?
Sorry, one other thing that I think would be important for us to consider, and if this was part of the scope, please chime in. But parent pickup lines are also a real issue in this district. So I would be curious if we did move forward with like a focus group and, some information gathering, understanding how a potential change to the schedule would impact those lines. Might it alleviate some of it or not? And then I would say that there might be a couple of cases where school-specific data could be really important, like Oxbridge and
Darien.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Rob, I have.
Yes, Bill?
So, kind of following up on what Katie mentioned, Rich, do you have any context? I noticed some of the earliest pickup times for the middle and high school were round about 50 minutes before the start. Is that because they're dropped off, then the bus goes back out and gets more?
No, so it depends really on where you're coming from. So if you're a high school student, you live in the Tokenique area, time it takes to do the pickups at Tokenique and then all the other pickups for 30 to 60 kids that are on a bus and get to the high school is gonna be longer than it might be in other areas. At the elementaries, I think it's usually 30 to 35 minutes.
Yes,
Kind of
yes.
the target. But because of the locations of where the high school is, as an example, and where some of the children live, and the number of students you have on the bus, it could be as much as.
And that's, Richard, made me think of Katie's point, where maybe those drop-off lines are long because the parents are sparing their children a 50-minute, early morning ride and just taking them themselves.
It could be, although the elementary runs are generally shorter than.
They're super short.
Yeah.
Because we have so many.
Yes, Joanna.
So, to that point, I know we discussed it, and I know, Ms. Powers does this, every year, ad hoc. The efficiency of the routes that we have and how long, that was actually mentioned as one of the tensions earlier along with school lunches, that parents get very frustrated with, what they view as an inefficient bus route and unnecessary time on the bus for their students. I don't know if there's a way to look into that even deeper than we have in the past, or if that's just literally the way that the clock works and there's no other option.
I would say, and I'll ask you guys to chime in, from what I've read in our timing, the routes are pretty short at the elementary school. Inefficiency versus inconvenience are two different things. And when a parent might want their child to be picked up and how long they might want them on the bus versus what is an industry standard for an efficient bus route. But I just wanted to put that on the table.
So school bus logistics has looked at our routes as well and whether or not any could be tightened up. 30 minutes for an elementary route, it's actually pretty small. I mean, there are districts that are for an elementary school that might have to be 45, 50 minutes, just like the high school.
Yeah, they are.
If you wanted to significantly shrink it, that's changing that window of opportunity, and that means more buses.
So again, it costs $150,000 to $55,000 a bus. And then my other question before that came up, to Katie's point, this is mostly negatives, and we have discussed a lot of the positives. There's a lot of scientific data about adolescent brains and their circadian rhythms, but it still seems like a really hard thing to do. Other districts in Connecticut and across the country have done it. Can we get some sort of data or information on how they make it work? Or is it just that as a community, they've decided that this is a priority of spending for them? Like where?
So we spoke to Greenwich and New Canaan because in the area, those are the two. It did come with a significant financial cost. And at the time, those communities felt it was worth it. Greenwich actually reversed course and went back to what they had because of budgetary constraints. And it wasn't a popular decision when they did it. I think they had a lot of bumps in the road. Both districts did, where at the high school, primarily, they ended up having to let kids out early, and that ended up causing a lot of issues for kids to make sports. It took probably Greenwich a year and a half to kind of work out some of those kinks. And then about a year after that, they ended up reverting back because of it. New Canaan felt, $1 million was worth the cost of making those changes for their school. And they made the decision to phase it in. They started in January, so that they felt the burden of the cost for 6 months, and then they went to a year, so that the incremental growth was a little bit less. And speaking to New Canaan, financially, it softened the blow a little bit. Operationally, it made it very, very difficult because students were used to one thing from September to December, and then they go to winter break, and then they're ready to come back in January, and all of a sudden everything changed. It caused a little bit of an issue just with, classes and whatnot. So that first, that segment of 6 months was a difficult transition. They retained their change in start time. And as mentioned, Greenwich went back to what it was.
And do we know if New Canaan has data about student outcome or anything like that?
We can
check, yeah.
And Rich, how many minutes did they adjust their start time by? Do you know
I would have
that?
to double check. I believe they went to 8:30 at the high school. But I would have to double check.
Yes.
And forgive me for it wasn't meant to be a list of negatives. I live in the worst case scenario as your superintendent. So I'm thinking of all the possible ramifications that will create obstacles and challenges to a change. So that's my list. So I own that. I just wanted to
I think that's
sort of the
wise to be
unfortunate way my
thorough.
brain now
Yeah.
works after years of doing this job.
Just one thing, I think it's also important to note that New Canaan has buses and a place where they park all of them, so they do have some additional.
They park their,
Flexibility.
they contract with DATCO, which is a different provider, but they park at the high school.
I would ask also because I'm
I just
sorry.
wanted, did you have anything to add on Joanna's question with other communities? And I know you can gather that information, but
Yeah, I mean-
anecdotally, anything you can add on that?
It's definitely not unique to your district, and we've helped districts all over the country do different things. And, you know, from a transportation side, we're looking at what are the effects of doing this. That's kind of what we do to Dr. Burns' point, like, not that it's all negative, but it's more like from an operational standpoint, it devolves, right? The other side of the house, there's a whole different line of thinking as far as the positives go, but the studies are out there. You know, we can talk through with Rich, different, said local people that have it, but we've got some folks all over the country that we've done work for, similar to this.
Just a correction, New Canaan went to 8 o'clock. So if it was kind of a closer scenario, it's kind of more like a scenario 2 that we have laid out here would be kind of similar to what they did.
One question, I think Wilton, if I'm not mistaken, basically flipped elementary to earlier, high school to later. So that would be also a good data point, just to understand
Yeah,
how
they've
they're
been doing
doing
it a
that
long time, right? Yeah.
many years. But like if they have elementary school that are their students, would they be getting picked up at like 6:30 a.m.? Or, I mean, it would just be interesting to understand that a little bit better as well. How that even worked for their community. Yes, Katie?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of plus one Joanna's request for the data centered around student outcomes in particular. I think especially piggybacking on the work that we're doing today about remembering why we're here, what our role is, and sort of the pledge that we make and serve, as well as, you know, adding in a true and unbiased comparison where we can see all scenarios, pros and cons laid out together, I think is just like an important piece of like the integrity of our decisions.
Greg?
One question and one thought on the high school bus do we know what like the utilization is at the high school for buses? Is it? How seniors can
So it
drive
de-
and juniors cannot
So
and below?
it honestly depends on the time of the year. The utilization is much higher in the winter when it's colder. You know, some buses can be as, you know, as many as 60 kids on a 70-passenger bus. Some can be as low as 30 on a 70-passenger bus. It really depends on where the kids are coming from and the time of the year.
Okay, fair enough. And then my thought is, I mean, I don't disagree with Katie in terms of doing some work to get more data to make the most informed decision. I do think, I mean, thinking about some of the ripple effects that were laid out here, which are definitely pretty wide. I think we should figure out how to prioritize what the next steps are so that we're attacking in the right way. Like Dr. Byrne raised a pretty, I think, maybe one of the most important ones, which is what's going to be the impact on staffing? Because if those numbers are even close to accurate, that's very scary to me.
Right, then also I would say, could we also look to New Canaan and see what
Yeah,
their
like what
impact
happened there.
was? I mean, you know, I know they've done this a lot in like California and in other climates. So I really am trying, maybe, I don't know if anyone in Massachusetts has done this, besides just our direct area, just to get some more information about what it looks like if it's successful. But I wouldn't want to, just thinking about it in other places around the country, even daylight is different, so.
I would say, I mean, from the standpoint of getting additional data, I do also think it would be important to get data from the athletics standpoint and the number of people, the schedules for travel, timing, the number of students and athletes that would
Right,
impact
how
at the high
much
school.
class
because
time would be missed?
that could be very significant, especially if you're going to an 8:30 start time for the high school, or 8 a.m. I would assume wouldn't be as much of a difference as it is now, but
Yeah, we could
But-
certainly almost take the scenarios and do a chart that shows. I don't know if there's an exact number, but it would depend on any given season and then also
Right.
on playoffs, but we could work with that.
just in terms of next steps, just based on feedback from the board, do you have questions, John, Bill, Dave, or feedback before I kind of wrap up on next steps?
I mean, I'll just comment. I think we've gone through this a few different times and we've heard the pros and the cons over a length of time. So I'm not sure how much time we should keep devoting to this, depending on sort of where the consensus is. And I guess we're gonna find out now, but this is what we've talked about for a long time. At some point, we need to either do it or not, so.
So on that note, I just, from a sense of the board, given that scenario 5 would be a $2.6 million cost, if we're talking about next steps and thinking about different scenarios, would it make sense to maybe limit the number of scenarios that we're potentially evaluating from a standpoint of community focus group or surveys? Do you have feelings about that, Katie?
So I would be happy to make a motion that asks the board to request the next step of focus groups and a formal staff survey. I don't see that we're ready to make or eliminate decisions, but gather more information. So
Do we need a formal motion to do that?
Well, if we want to order
Okay.
work, we just need to give Eric direction, but
In the follow-up item.
yes.
So just from the standpoint of what we've talked about at this point, it would seem to me that we would need to have a survey, a formal survey of the staff, impact on staff, focus groups with the parents, also students.
I would
Or what would you
also suggest a
propose?
survey to families, because not everybody's going to be able to participate in a focus group.
Sorry, a survey, however would make it easiest. And this needs to be pre-K through 12 because you have siblings and families that have daycare and jobs and everything that would have logistical compounding issues here. The students, I believe, also would need to be surveyed, especially at the high school, given that there are before and after school. But how do you?
I might suggest that if we want to do this and do this well, we take the model we have before, like we did this similar thing when we were hiring a new superintendent. So I would maybe say that we want to do it in the same way of that, as opposed to prescripting all of it right now.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a question, you raise a good point, like, should we be going and doing the survey on all 5 of these? Or can we, as a board, look at what the information we've gotten and eliminate some of these just by looking at them and seeing some of the, no, I think pretty clearly I would not support scenario 5. It's an extra $2.6 million per year. That's just me, but that seems like a lot of money. And I don't, that's a huge cost. That sounds like it's more than double any of these other districts. So can we eliminate scenario 5, for example? I don't know if there's other issues with other scenarios. We can see like the early start time for elementary school, 6:30 pickup. Do we think that's an issue? Like I think like, can we pick fewer scenarios to do the survey on? Does that make sense?
I see both of you. So Bill and then John.
So, Rich, I want to circle back with you. New Canaan. I'm assuming they had a start time very similar to ours, like 7:40, and they moved to 8.
I believe they were 7:30 and then they went to 8.
So that would put us at like the 8:15 one.
Correct.
I'm just trying, for 20 minutes, if we went to 8 o'clock, is that worth it? Is it that much of a difference?
Right, we don't know, right? Like
Yeah,
there's different studies, so to just pick things out, yes and no right
Yeah.
now without having it all laid out in front
No,
of
I
us.
get it, but then to Greg's point, which I agree with you. Maybe we should, okay, if you really want to make a change, then let's go all the way, see what 8:30 would spend all that money. And see, does that make a difference? If it makes a difference in educational outcomes and everything else, then maybe we do. But I just, in my own mind, question, is 20 minutes worth $500,000? And the answer is I don't know.
I would
Because I
think
don't
that
know
you will find people in the community that agree with you and people in the community that don't. So I would say actually getting tangible data on that rather than just one interest group that wants it and one interest group that doesn't. It would be, I think it would be worth our while to examine it and then be able to make a decision from there.
But to be clear, so the current start time is 7:40 a.m. Right? The 8 a.m. start time, scenario 2, has 0 additional cost.
That scenario
Scenario
1 is
one.
0.
I'm sorry, scenario 1, 8 a.m., 0 additional cost. It's the other scenarios 2 through 5 that have anywhere from 300K to 2.6 million per year.
Right, and that's kind of, I agree with
So
you.
your question about like, is the extra 20 minutes worth it? I mean, like, there's no incremental
I
cost to
don't think we
that.
have the answer is
I
my
don't think
point.
we
And to
know,
Katie's
like-
point, I think we need more information.
Katie?
Thanks. So I think that like coming back to this, scenario 1, 20 minutes, but 20 minutes is zero cost, right? I would say leave that in. Scenario 5, that does fall under our purview, to Greg's point. Like this cost might be just prohibitive where, even myself, I'm like, well, what educational impact could we have if we're spending that much money? Those are things we have to think about. I guess again, though, I would come back to, I don't know if we need to decide exactly right now how prescriptive we would be about the information going forward, because maybe 4 scenarios versus 5 is not a heavy lift. Like, I think we could leave that to the focus group designers. I think for today, the most important thing is saying, we want some more information and we'll work together for what and how we get it.
Are there other board comments? John, did you have a?
I just feel like we're kind of spinning our wheels here and we're just kind of like, excuse all the automotive or bus puns, but like, we're just kind of going off without a roadmap or directions. And so I think Greg is right in terms of we need to kind of fine tune this. And then also too, this is a lot of work for Eric and his team to be working on as well. So is that aggressive? Is a focus group more cost efficient and time efficient? Is a survey to parents more cost efficient and time efficient? Like what's a smart way to approach this in terms of our,
Well, we did,
our resources?
we did speak with school leadership. And we had agreed with them to do focus groups for us, modeled after the superintendent search. So they had agreed to do a similar process. So there would be some of our staff time involved in it, but they would be leading that piece with survey focus groups.
With staff and with
And
families.
how would we, even in our district, really parse an educational outcome when we're performing at very high level? And to your point earlier today, it's very difficult to see 25%. They're just nearly impossible for us.
Well,
So are we operating on a very thin margin on any educational improvement? Is a question, and I'm not
It would be
proposing an
one
answer right
to
now, but it's
research
something
and
worth
find out.
considering. Yeah. We're
I
paying money
think,
for.
sorry.
Katie, go ahead.
I think you bring up a good point, though, about being thoughtful that if we were going to engage into this, we take the opportunity of the year before it's implemented to collect some data. I might suggest looking at our first period classes, right? What are our tardies? What are our engagement levels? What are our, grades, outcomes, those kind of things. And then if we were to implement a later start at the high school, review that. Did we see a positive outcome? Did we have all of those things like an improvement? But I think your point is well taken that any aspect that we do, we should really be thoughtful about doing as best we can.
Okay, I agree, we need more data. I agree with Greg that the staff impact and commuting time and everything is a very, very significant point, just based on I know it's not a scientific survey at this point, but to the extent that we're doing a follow-up, we need to take all of those different factors into account in the focus groups or surveys or whatever the best vehicle would be. I personally
we
think
can
that,
certainly
yeah,
work with school leadership
Yeah.
to design
to
that
design what
Yeah.
would be the best way to approach it.
with focus groups and surveys. And then there's some additional data and information for us to pull, getting the data from New Canaan, Wilton, any additional data that our consultants can provide, and trying to foresee, I'm not sure how we do it, but I'd work with Chris on the athletics data side of things.
About the impact on that, yeah. Okay,
So
yeah.
will the focus groups and the surveys, like, this is sort of like my big question is like, are we presenting to them these specific 5 alternative scenarios? Or are there other scenarios we don't even know about? But I mean, that's sort of his question. It's like, well, if there are, why don't we see them?
I didn't envision these groups, and I'm not a social scientist, so this is not my forte. I didn't envision them as like sitting down parents and saying, these are your choices, what do you want? I envisioned it being more, qualitative. What are you looking for? What change is most important to you? What would you like your taxes to go up to support? Not necessarily like ABC theory.
Right, but I do think we'd have to give some sort of options
Yeah, I think
to gather hard data to see where the support would be in the community.
Because couldn't the community just come up with some random scenario that doesn't
exist.
fall into one of these, and then we're like, hey, what does this cost? And it's like, well, that's $10 million a year. It's like, wow, why did we waste our time asking about that?
Okay, I still don't think we should, I mean, I would be surprised if anybody wanted scenario 5, but I don't think we should take it out.
Just, I agree. The reason that we went through this study in the first place was to find out the feasibility from the experts and how we could actually do this. So I believe that we can include all 5 scenarios because we know that those could be done based on the consultant's feedback. And I think we need to be very, very specific with families. Because if you give them something that's completely open-ended,
Yeah, it
to
can't
Greg's
be
point,
too
we
abstract.
can't do that. We need it to be very structured
But I
because that's
think
how.
it can be both.
We
Yeah,
can,
I
we
think
can
it can be
include
both.
an option to give additional feedback, absolutely. But I think that Marty and Rena's school leadership could help.
I mean, the
with
entire
the-
community could say this is too much of an impact to the extracurriculars and this is a no.
Yeah,
But we won't know that if we don't ask
No,
that
that's,
question either.
that's
So,
correct. That's right. And the athletics piece and student
So,
government are like
whatever.
before or
I
after
mean, you know,
school. Yeah.
parents I know with
Who knows
schools at
what
later
that is?
times get frustrated. They can't get their kid to practice on time with the lineups at the pickups and all that
Yeah.
stuff. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of moving pieces. So just the more
Um,
information that is gatherable without being abstract, I think is the better.
I think there's enough guidance from the board here in this discussion that we can work with school leadership on the next steps. And, you know, sometime later in the school year, this is definitely later in the school year. This is not, I will say right now, based on what we have to gather, this is not part of the budget development process for FY 28. There's no way that can be possible. But we can work on this throughout the fall.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for your work and I appreciate everyone's feedback. So we'll do that as next steps for transportation. I'm assuming we're not talking about walk radius. Sorry, walk radius, we did not really touch on, but
I mean, I asked what, and,
Yeah.
the 3 buses and 7 buses, the one thing I would wonder if, that might alleviate that, you know, a lot of times parents don't want their kids to walk over the highways and stuff like that, and they can literally see the bus that their child is not allowed to go on. And since COVID, it's been much more strict. So I don't know if we want to change that policy that even if you aren't technically assigned to a bus, but you can walk to it on your own, you'd be allowed, you know, I don't know if we'd have to do that bus by bus, depending on the ridership of each bus, but, you know,
Thoughts, Rich? How would that work? I know.
Can you say that again?
it's okay. So if someone is not zoned for, like, you know, with not outside the radius, but literally the bus is the next street over, that student is technically not allowed on that bus. But it used to be before COVID, the bus driver would let you on anyway. I was wondering if we could talk about changing the policy back to
So-
going that way.
So
or-
some of the issues that we have, and it does tend to happen more in the winter months, is then when that happens, the bus is overcrowded and there aren't enough seats for the kids. And so when there are not enough seats for the kids, sometimes the kids, if they're older, will sit on the aisle of the floor and then the bus can't go. And so there has been instances where like the high school administration or the middle school administration will have to take the kids off the bus because you do run into that. When the bus isn't overcrowded, you know, and sometimes that happens, will the bus driver still look the other way? I mean, they will. But there are definitely instances where the bus can't depart because there are too many kids actually on the bus.
So the unpredictability
Right.
piece would be. All right, we definitely have good information for us to take some next steps.
okay, so we'll move on to agenda item E, discussion on proposed Board of Education goals for 2026, 2027.
So what I did for the board's conversation was take last year's goals and the conversations we've been having. And this is a very rough draft of what could potentially be goals for the coming year. Thinking about the ones, again, thinking from a governance mindset, what are the appropriate kinds of goals for the board? Where would they sit? And I thought that would be helpful as a starter to the conversation.
Okay, so again, goal number 1, adopting the new 5-year strategic plan. Goal number 2, complete successful and timely contract negotiations, which I'm assuming in this case would be the DAA.
The DAA, do we have any other? That's the only one for this year. Yeah.
Goal number 3, delivery a fiscally responsible 28 budget. Goal number 4, oversee final completion of HHR elementary building projects, complete Middlesex Middle School facility study and educational specifications, and study long-term capital project needs, including a bus depot. Goal number 5, enhance engagement and communication between community board and district administration. And goal number 6, establish a culture of strategic oversight that ensures the board remains focused on governance rather than management. So I think these are good goals, given the kinds of tasks that we have to accomplish this year, particularly on the facilities side. Are there other comments from a board about any thoughts or changes you might want to see?
I
Yes,
just have
great.
one quick one on goal 4. The study of the long-term capital projects needs, including the bus depot. I was thinking that also includes the Middlesex. It's sort of like a comprehensive.
Yeah, well, there's the Middlesex piece that's in there already.
Right.
And then the long-term it's it's the 10-year that we talked about, and that would include all of the facilities. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I just think of it as like, there's a broader long-term capital project assessment that includes an evaluation of everything, including Middlesex.
Right. So I
Where
think
we will then take whatever comes out of that.
that would be a good,
These are the priorities.
good strategy point to put on the bottom is a notation about the 10-year facility study that includes all district.
Yeah, like I feel like we got to use that to dictate, include, like, are we going to do Middlesex or are there other things? How are we going to, what's the capital allocation strategy going forward, inclusive of potentially doing Middlesex?
Kind of on that note, one question I did have, just given the master agenda, our new enrollment projection will be on November 24th. So we won't know until then what the potential, 20 years out would be that would impact Middlesex in terms of the capacity planning and.
Well, we know what we
What
have
our
from
needs-
last year's study, so
Yeah.
certainly that is helpful in that conversation.
Okay, but given the recent enrollment decline in, for instance, just 7th grade, maybe that happens every single year, but I think we need to think about the capacity planning standpoint and what scope of renovation we would need at the middle school, and just kind of take that into consideration as we pursue that goal in particular. Are there other comments from the board about goals for the board for this year? No feedback. Okay, so with that, I believe we have a motion on, or is this a first reading of the goals?
It's first reading.
Okay, first reading of the board goals. So we will conclude with that discussion and then move on to item H. First reading and discussion on proposed schedule of 2027 Board of Ed regular meetings and proposed schedule of 26-27 Board of Education subcommittee meetings. Dr. Byrne.
The first attachment, the schedule for regular Board of Ed meetings is following the same pattern that the district has followed for a number of years. So you see a proposed calendar with reflecting the January 7th meeting. Nothing too dissimilar from what we have here, and what we currently have.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
So instead of having several Tuesday meetings that we've had to cancel for Board of Finance meetings, we've moved several with this asterisk.
In
Those will be on
advance.
Thursdays to accommodate the Board of Finance set schedule.
Yeah.
So we're not canceling and rescheduling meetings like we've done the last 3 years or since I've been here.
We're trying to be proactive on that in advance.
So Thursdays instead of Wednesdays, is Thursdays a better?
Well,
date.
it's for when we had the conflicts with the
Right,
Board of Finance meetings during the budget
And that
process.
was just because you don't want to have 2 nights in a row, like 2 long nights possibly in a row.
Oh, because we would be participating in,
In the
I
Board of
understand.
Finance, yeah.
Okay,
And we don't
Okay.
have their budget schedule yet, but like
Right.
the last couple of years, we've had to do that every year.
It's been pretty consistent.
okay. Thank you.
Is the 27th of July, is that a regular meeting or is that, I mean, that's like this meeting? Is that-
It's kind of like today. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
We're also talking about the committees or just?
Well, why don't we do first the board calendar? Are there any questions or comments on the board calendar? Anyone?
I thought Cass wanted to reschedule meetings.
Anyone have any feedback? Or we can move to subcommittee?
Yeah,
Katie?
I just want to confirm that the November 9th is not election day. That's the week following,
I believe so.
right? Because it looks like there's the 2nd and the 9th are both Tuesdays. So
Yes, election day. is the second.
election day. Okay, great. Because I know that happened one year where it was like very, very tight.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
November.
Yeah, it's the following week.
Okay.
Okay.
Election day is November 3rd, right? That's what you were just saying, right? Yeah.
For 2027. 2027, it should be the 2nd.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is 27. Yeah.
And
Sorry about
this
that.
doesn't include all like the special. Like there's always like, I'm just looking at like the month of December, for example, like don't we typically have like a bunch of special meetings to do budget stuff?
Budget things, but those were mostly January, I believe. Are those on here?
Oh, is that all the
budget?
January?
Well, they're on
things?
the master agenda, all the budget meetings.
So
Yeah, I'm just.
Cass, go ahead.
This is
The
regular.
January meetings are all of those budget meetings that it's the structure Dr. Burns established this year. So the January meetings will be the budget meetings, and then they'll also, some of the meetings will only be with regard to budget. Some of them will have our traditional per the master agenda, our specific updates and things like that. But the budgets, this was developed to get rid of Super Saturday.
Yeah.
So we essentially go every Tuesday for about 6 weeks, but it's to cover the structure of the budget meetings.
Is the title still, are they regular meetings or are they
They will be
special?
regular meetings
They are.
because they're being approved this.
In
budget.
advance,
These will
right.
not be scheduled.
Great.
They became
special
special meetings
That,
last
that
year
was the
because
clarification I was looking for.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions or feedback on this? On the board meetings? Okay, we'll move on to subcommittee monthly meetings.
So
Go ahead.
I appreciate that we're already trying to pare down meetings we've had to cancel in the past.
right.
I'm just wondering with all these changes that we just talked about up in the beginning of the meeting with Jessica, if this is enough policy meetings to address whatever policies we're going to have to change.
We believe so. We looked at the policy pieces. We think that it will be based on that.
Thank you.
Katie?
So I wonder if we might revisit our practice for approving subcommittee meetings and instead of approving them for school years, approve them for calendar years. Because it seems a bit presumptive to approve meeting times when we change committee makeup in November. And so certain dates and times might not work for the committees so I wonder if we don't approve this for the end of 2026, which then gives maybe just a December meeting, which is, we don't even have, right? So then that would allow the new committees to approve the schedule.
One of the challenges that we create on the professional staff is many of us have things calendared out through June of this year. We would need to isolate whatever day of the week is and just leave it empty from now, but school visits, PPTs, things like that.
Okay.
It would create a little bit of a scheduling challenge on our side of the table.
Okay, well
But
then
I certainly see your point. I think it's,
perhaps it can just be a post-it note for consideration as we move forward if there's room for flexibility.
yeah. Well, I think we definitely this year showed flexibility in moving meetings when we needed to, based on any individual's schedules. And I think you have our commitment to continue doing that moving forward.
All right, one option, I mean, we in the past did have meetings on different days of the week for different committees, so if there's,
I was just gonna say that this is not submitted to the town like as a
Mhm.
schedule, it's a tentative schedule that approve here, but it's not one of those
Okay.
that's, so each meeting is
Yeah, we're not
presented as a
eligible
special
for
meeting.
this one.
So it's not approved by the town or on record with the town. This
Okay.
is just our tentative schedule for the year.
Okay.
And then each week I won't post until 2 days before, like it's not recorded with the town until it's noticed when we do it,
Okay, got it.
the 2 days before.
So do we actually vote on the subcommittee meetings?
You do vote on them
But
because we
it's
do
not-
list it
okay.
on the website as a tentative approved schedule, but it's nothing that's.
Okay. So we'll have flexibility, and this is the first reading. But again, in the past, we had different days for different policies, or, different committees, if we needed to do something more similar to that going forward. Other comments or feedback? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda, which includes, actually, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Joanna, seconded by, may I have a second? Katie. So the consent agenda includes approval of minutes from the special board meeting, June 23rd, 2026, and the regular board meeting from June 23rd, 2026, and the personnel report. Is there any discussion on any items on the consent agenda? Joanna?
I thought I saw on here that we had one instructional coach hired, but maybe I misread that. And I was just wondering what the status is on all 5 of those.
We are up to the equivalent of 3 instructional coaches and still searching.
Thank you.
So we have 2 that are full-time and then 2 that are sharing a position between 2 part-time people. So.
Are there other board questions or desire to discuss other consent agenda items? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda? That is unanimous. We'll move on now to public comment.
Good afternoon. If you would like to participate in public comment, please approach the podium and state your name and town of residence for the record. Please note that you will have up to 3 minutes to comment. We have no public comment at this time.
Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? I have a motion, Bill?